after 10, you're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. A very good morning indeed to you, especially if you are in Middlesbrough this morning and reeling, no doubt, both from events and perhaps from the attention that your town is now receiving. A Middlesbrough MP has described the intimidation felt by residents as terrorism after 9 people were killed and police announced 19 arrests in less than a week. Add to that the fact that we discovered yesterday 200 police officers have been drafted in from around the north of England, from neighbouring forces, following a series of violent incidents since that head-on car crash early on Saturday that killed 7 people, including 2 police officers. 2 more people, 7-year-old Valentina Foster and her aunt Natalie MacDonald, died in a house fire on Wednesday, with police investigating possible links between that and wider organised crime. Links that have not been definitively established, let me make that absolutely clear. But I don't think it's a morning for condemning some of the coverage. It seems to me to be fair, at least. Under siege is the front page that the Daily Mirror chooses to go with, describing a brutal gang war that has left families terrified. The Daily Telegraph, which is, traditionally perhaps a slightly more sober organ than some of the tabloids. Police surge to tackle northern gang wars, and this reports the police officers flooding into Middlesbrough amid fears of escalating gang violence. And the Sun, how did UK town become a war zone? And that features a photograph on the front page of little Valentina Foster that is, absolutely heartbreaking. And the Sun don't hold back. I mean, as far as I'm aware, there aren't any definitive links between the violence and this particular incident, but they go with as 200 cops sent to tackle gang feud that killed girl. 7. I've got no idea where to start really this morning. I mean, I'm tempted to ask you that question, so let me tell you now. The phone line, if you want it, is open. How did UK town become a war zone? I mean, you may object to the use of that. What is going on in Middlesbrough, really, is the question that I would ask you, because it seems to me that this looks like a real-life version of the attempts by various online racists and weirdos to depict London as some kind of terrible place. I can't. I mean, there must be streets in Middlesbrough that are lovely, and you walk down. It's not a town I know at all. I'm quite well travelled for a London-based member of the media. I know my way around quite a lot of England, both north of London and south of London, but I know very little about Middlesbrough. A very, very good friend of mine hails from there, but he's lived down here for most of his life. I know Brian Clough was from there as a childhood Nottingham Forest fan. I think Brian Clough met his wife in Ria's Creamy Ices, a famous Middlesbrough institution that is no more. But I don't know enough about it to even begin to speculate on the question of why it would be a particularly virulent victim of changing social norms. Because that's the point. What's going on in Middlesbrough is not going to be unique, but it seems to be happening more and worse in Middlesbrough than it is in this country almost anywhere else. It is, for example, measurably the most dangerous place to live in England and Wales. This is according to official crime figures. And to my embarrassment, if you'd asked me last week what the most dangerous place was to live in England and Wales, I don't think Middlesbrough would have made my top 10. I don't really know what would have done, but you'd lean towards big cities, and then you'd be reminded that it has to be per capita. You have to divide crime by the number of people living there, or divide the number of people living there by the number of crimes to get an idea of what the most dangerous areas are. But over the past year, people living in the Teesside area were also most at risk of being murdered. 23,419 crimes in Middlesbrough over the 12 months to the previous 12 months, a crime rate of about 150 crimes per 1,000 people. And a lot of the other worst places to be in this context are in that neck of the woods: Redcar, Stockton, Hartlepool. We are a London-centric bunch in the media, for good or for ill. We just are. Most of us are based in London. And we rarely extend our perspectives beyond the M25, I suppose. But I have no idea what it is about Middlesbrough that perhaps explains these phenomena? And that's my first question for you, okay? 9 minutes after 10 is the time. Why is Middlesbrough so... Well, I don't want to upset you either. So what word would you use here? Vulnerable? Why is Middlesbrough such a dangerous place? There we go. It's the most dangerous place to live in England and Wales. And, of course, you can answer that with either the explanation of what's going on. It's a dangerous place because of gangs and drugs and violence, or it's a dangerous place because of the reasons why gangs and drugs and violence have managed to take a hold on a town in ways that other towns of similar size and similar socioeconomic status have simply not. That's the bit I'm interested in, the specifics, if you like, of Middlesbrough. 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need. I suspect, and I could be wrong about this. I would love to be wrong, but I don't think I am. I suspect that if the perceived culprits were of an ethnic minority heritage or background, then the flavour and the tone of the coverage would be very different in modern Britain, in Brexit Britain, in the land that Nigel built. I suspect if this could in some way be linked to immigration, or it could be offered up as an example of some form of human hierarchy, then we would be talking about it, or most of the media would be talking about it in a very different way. Quite a few of you making that point already in my inbox, and I think it's true, but I don't know that it's helpful to the conversation that I want to have today. This is a place where we would talk equally about events, regardless of the ethnicity of the people who committed them. It's a very unpopular position in the British media, but if you have, for example, a sex offender, then my thoughts go first to the victim and then to the authorities. I don't think first, what colour was his skin? That's going to define how I cover this. Or what country was he born in? That's going to be the thing that I consider to be most important here. And the same here. I make that point by all means, but what is it about this town that explains this plight, this current situation? And let me say some things about towns I do know. I mean, I grew up in a town called Kidderminster, smaller than Middlesbrough. I was there at the weekend. The restaurant I worked in when I was a kid is still boarded up. They've knocked down the Woolworths and replaced it with parkland. That took 30 years. 25 years to do, and the restaurant I worked in when I was a kid survived for a while. I mean, it shut when I was working there, but it's still boarded up 10 years after closing down, and that does something to a town. But towns up and down the country are like that. The death of industry, all of these things will be part of it. The death of industry is going to be relevant perhaps, but that's not unique to Middlesbrough. So that's the first half. That's 52% of this phone-in. What is going on in Middlesbrough? And why is Middlesbrough the most dangerous place to live in England and Wales? 0345 6060 973 is the number that you need to do that. But to extend the conversation beyond the northeast, to potentially every corner of this country, I also want you to tell me what it's like to live in the midst of criminality. This is actually one of the really strange things about London and other big cities, is that we often have great wealth living cheek by jowl with great poverty. It's the Notting Hill Carnival this weekend, one of the most magnificent events in the capital's annual calendar, and Notting Hill is an area I know well. An area where I couldn't afford to raise my family, despite it also being an area in the sort of North Kensington environs, near where Grenfell Tower still stands. The poverty there is off the charts. It's among some of the poorest parts in the country, but you can walk yards and be in Millionaires Row. You can walk yards from some of the poorest social housing in the land to some of the finest mansions in the entire country. And that perhaps means that it's hard for a London-based observer or commentator to get a proper handle on the idea of a town where entire streets or entire estates are riven by crime. For example, in West London, not far from Notting Hill, there's an estate that has had more than its fair share of crime and gun crime, but it sits right next to the estate that I used to live on, which was a sort of Victorian workman's cottages. Some of them still social housing, some of them had fallen into private hands. So you would have people ferrying their children to private school, and then 3 streets down you'd have police tape up because there'd been another shooting. And that it means that you don't. It doesn't feel like a town has teetered on the brink and fallen. It feels like a town has pockets of difference and diversity, wealth and poverty. Middlesbrough, as it is being portrayed, and the other thing you must do today is tell me if this portrayal is unfair, and lots of other towns as well where gangs hold sway, they're going to be able to set the tone for the entire area. When I lived on that estate and we got burgled, I remember the police telling me that they could be fairly confident who'd done it. So there were 2 families on that estate who were responsible, or 2 households on that estate who were responsible for most of the burglaries and most of the crimes. And in my naive middle-class way, I didn't understand why they couldn't kick the door in and go and rescue my laptop and mobile phone. But, of course, that's not how it works without evidence. But it didn't feel like my area was defined by the crime. Do you see what I mean? I'm reading about the most dangerous place to live in England and Wales. I'm reading about empty streets. I'm reading about ghost towns. And I'm reading about decent people living in fear of feral humans, of gangsters. I don't like that word. It sounds almost glamorous. Makes you think of Al Capone, right, and the Untouchables. Of criminals, of violent criminals who don't care who they hurt or how they hurt them. What's it like to be a normal person living in these abnormal circumstances? 0345 6060973. So I've got a Middlesbrough-specific question that I really need your help with, because I've got nothing. What is going on in your town? Or if it's a town you know, you don't need to be in it, but you know it. What is going on in Middlesbrough? 0345 6060973. And the second question becomes, I can get my head around this. I know what hypervigilance is. I talked to you last week, and I'm glad I did, because it resonated with an awful lot of you, judging by some of the messages you sent me. That the events, the stories, the things that move from our heads to our stomachs, when you feel something in your stomach that is a form of fear. It doesn't, I mean, it can be rational or irrational, but when your stomach is in knots because of threat, because of fear. And the thing about that is that for the massive majority of us, it comes and goes. When it's in place, it's horrible. You can wake up in the morning with it in the pit of your belly, and you wish you could get rid of it. You can't reason it away. You can't talk yourself into feeling better because you're frightened of something. Now, it might be that you're frightened of your boss, or you're frightened of losing your job, or you're frightened of having a fight at school later today, but you're frightened of something specific and contained, which means that one day soon you're going to wake up in the morning and it's not going to be there. But I want to know what it's like to be in an area where you're frightened of something unspecific and uncontained. You're living somewhere dangerous, where the danger has nothing to do with you, where you are, if you like, exposed to threat. You're exposed to peril and danger because it's going on around you all the time, and yet it's got nothing to do with you. Because that form of hypervigilance, that knot in your stomach is well, I imagine, is permanent, isn't it? That must be a terrible way to live. I mean, an absolutely exhausting way to live. It's as if that fight or flight impulse that we all have is constant rather than event specific. Fight or flight is the natural human response to danger. Something in front of you that threatens you appears, and you have an impulse either to run away or to fight. That's why it's called fight or flight. And that's in your stomach. That's the nervous system. What would it be like? What is it like? And this doesn't have to be in Middlesbrough, of course. This could be anywhere where criminals have the run of the place. I've never lived in a town like that. I've never lived in a street like that, where criminals have the run of the place. What's that like? 0345 60973. When my wife was at university in Liverpool, a local criminal died, and she still talks about this now. It was as if it was like Diana, Princess of Wales. It was an entire street covered in flowers. I don't know whether it was a sort of throwback to what people used to say about Ronnie and Reggie Cray, or you were safe when they were in charge. You could leave your front door open, which for people of my generation always sounded really weird. It's not like that now. It's well, I don't know what it's like, except that it's constant and it must be terrible to live with, and it doesn't happen only in Middlesbrough. It quite possibly happens to you, and if it does, I want you to tell me what it's like. So, what's going on in Middlesbrough, and what's it like to live in a community that is controlled by criminals? 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
21 minutes after 10, one rather obvious flaw in the programme this morning, which is why it is in two parts, one specific to Middlesbrough and one not. And I think the obvious flaw is highlighted here. Please do not name me, says this texter. I have lived in Middlesbrough for the last 50 years. We have pockets of good neighbourhoods, and we have known for decades of the areas where the streets are unsafe. The portrayal of the whole town as dangerous is unbalanced and unfair. I do not doubt that. I'm going to delete that message now so that I don't accidentally say your name. But allow me to point out it's a relatively normal name. And yet you're still worried about me reading it out on the radio. And I don't know if people from Middlesbrough are going to ring me, because you'd be worried. You don't have to use your real name. We can pretend that you're not in Middlesbrough. I mean, I could do whatever you want. But that phrase that was used by that texter, the streets are unsafe. That's what I was trying to convey. It's not like that street is like, or that bit of that street, or some wrong-uns live in that house. The streets you live on are unsafe, and that absence of safety has nothing to do with you. I want to know what that's like. Tommy's in Blackpool. Tommy, what made you pick up the phone?
Hi, James. So I have family who live in Middlesbrough, and the situation is, to answer your question, it's due to a lack of policing. It's probably due to the Conservatives taking off 20,000 coppers. So what happens is somebody commits a crime that 30, 40 years ago they would be scared to do, right, i.e. have a gun or have drugs in the car. Now, if you're scared to do that, then, other people are going to be scared to do it. And it's going to limit the amount of guns and drugs. Now, what happens is, gradually over time, when one criminal feels confident and does it again, doesn't get caught, does it again, doesn't get caught, and people cotton on to it, as the police go down, slowly that becomes part of the society, where there's guns and there's drugs relatively available in public places.
So there's a bit of chance here. It could happen anywhere, but it has happened there.
Yeah, it's happened in other, as you said, it's happened in other places.
Of course, but I mean, it is unfortunately a simple statistic that Middlesbrough is now the most dangerous place to live in England. So the criminality, it takes a hold and then it spreads. And I've read about cuts to the police. I don't know where you got the 20,000 figure from, but that's going to be true elsewhere as well. I mean, we're back to Osborne's razor, aren't we? All roads lead back to austerity. So why Middlesbrough in particular, do we think?
Well, with the nice, I'm trying to be polite when I say this. Middlesbrough was quite a poor area anyway.
Well, now, I mean, it was also quite a wealthy area. It was at the heart of the Industrial Revolution, wasn't it?
It was a long time ago.
It was a long time ago, yes, obviously.
I mean, you're right. Yeah, I suppose maybe once it was. I mean, but I'm trying to be quite polite. Like, so
what do you mean by polite?
Because I'm describing an area where people live, and
yeah, I understand. So you're trying to be decent. You don't want to tar everybody with the same brush or portray the entire town as a bunch of scumbag criminals. Yeah.
Correct. And, members of my family live there. The thing is, you see, crime, the devil dances in empty pockets. So when someone's got no money, and, it used to be like, okay, Jack the lad wants a car, wants this, wants that. But now it's a case of somebody who works hard for the family can't afford to buy things. So they might maybe hold some drugs or a gun for somebody and get paid. They might maybe turn a blind eye to a crime and get a few quid off somebody for that. You see, so what happens is it's so interwoven, and also, and I hate to say this as well,
go on.
You often, and I can't say this is the case, but when you have like corrupt police and you have corrupt customs officials as well. Now, I've got to be quite careful how I say this. That can often add to the problem because that's unmonitored, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. But again, that's going to be potentially true anywhere. And I mean, even if you could back that up with evidence, and I think we can both agree that you can't, it wouldn't be unique to Middlesbrough, and B, you wouldn't be able to do it on this radio programme anyway because of the very obvious legal reasons. So Middlesbrough has the highest crime rate, excluding central London, and of course very few people live in central London. It's going to be opportunistic crimes and street crimes that drive those numbers. People living in Teesside are the most at risk of being murdered. And I mean, this is why it's a phoning in two halves. Half of it is what is it about Middlesbrough, and half of it is the nature of unsafe streets.
Well,
and you've done a good job of knitting the two together, but I still can't quite see why Middlesbrough has the lead on this, as it were.
Okay, so because if you watch a race, right, or watch a marathon, different people are going to be in the lead at different times. So there might be 4 or 5 top runners in the world. They will. It's just at this particular time. Middlesbrough is soon. It might be Glasgow. It might be going back to Liverpool. It might go to.
Well, this is going to be local politics, isn't it? This is actually going to be down to whoever is in charge of the region.
They've got part of the responsibility. Yes, I'd say a lot of it. Really though, to get the problem sorted ASAP, you need more police
on the streets and more fear of consequences. You need more.
Now, because this is one of those problems that sometimes there's a straightforward solution, and obviously with certain problems isn't. But it's because like it used to be. Now, whether or not that'll happen, whether or not you'll have your AI robots doing it.
Yeah, no, I hear you. So lack of opportunity, widespread poverty, but the thing that really seeds this kind of situation is the policing issue. It is the idea that somebody bad does something bad, and the consequences are not severe enough to stop them from doing it again, or to stop other people from doing it, and that spreads like cancer.
Yes, or there's no consequences, because it's or you're going to get away with it because there isn't enough people to check you, because they've got to do. There just isn't enough police, so. Yeah, as bad as that sounds, it's the truth. And give it a few years, it could be back to Liverpool, it could be somewhere in Scotland.
Well, they will. They'll send in task forces, and I mean they're sending in 200 police officers from other forces, and they may, as you say, turn the tide. But it moves somewhere else because deprivation, health inequalities, substance misuse. This is the Police and Crime Commissioner for the region listing all of these things. Mental health challenges all play a significant role and require a coordinated response from government and public services. Is it Ben Houchen? Is it his patch, this?
I'm not sure.
I think it is. I think he got put in the House of Lords by Boris Johnson. I think he's the Metro Mayor for this neck of the woods. He certainly used to be. I'll double-check that. But here you have it. The most dangerous cities in the UK Middlesbrough is top. They recently supplanted Blackpool. So something happens when you have epic deprivation in an area and poor policing. You can have arguably the police should be more visible on the streets where there isn't any money than they are on the streets where there's lots. Thinking back to the coverage of expensive watches getting stolen in London. You do not walk around London, whatever racist Americans might tell you on Twitter, feeling frightened for your safety. You simply don't. I walk around London every single day. These streets in this town, I would not feel safe on. I really wouldn't. But, of course, there's no political capital to be made because you can't blame it all on immigration, which is why I don't imagine Nigel Farage will be addressing the nation anytime soon about any of this. It's coming up to 10:30. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. And there it is. You might be lucky, says Stephen, to get anyone to contact you from a place that is run by criminals because they might be too scared to say anything in case of repercussions. Danny picks up on a point I was trying to make. Middlesbrough was once the industrial capital of the UK, mainly due to the invention of the steam engine. That first railway actually ran through the town. It was the iron and steel hub for the world. The Sydney Harbour Bridge was constructed in Middlesbrough. Did you know that? Along with the Tyne Bridge. But since the 1980s, it's been in steady decline. No jobs, no prospects. And Danny's in County Durham, about half an hour away from Middlesbrough itself. But none of this, and listen, I think that what Tommy said was very strong about the idea of the lead in a race swapping. and changing, but it's usually the same towns. Middlesbrough has overtaken Blackpool. Blackpool might overtake Middlesbrough again. Manchester is bad. Manchester is another place where entire areas, entire postcodes or entire estates can be dominated by criminality. Why Middlesbrough? What? I mean, again, the specifics of it. On the one hand, 0345 60 60 973, and then the generality. What is it like to be frightened on your own streets? Isn't that mad that is, hear it all the time in the context of immigration from people who've got next to nothing to be frightened of. But of course, the way the newspapers are framing everything and the way racist politicians present everything, you're being persuaded that there's a violent asylum seeker lurking around every corner. Here is a historic English town that's the most dangerous place in the land, and I don't think I've ever heard J.D. Vance or Nigel Farage acknowledge its existence. It's 10:31. Dominic Ellis has your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
10:34 is the time. Hi, James. I work for Children's Services in Middlesbrough. We do have a lot of young people being exploited, parents and carers neglecting their children and themselves due to drugs and trauma, etc. There's also a lot of history in Middlesbrough of gang and criminal behaviour. There are good people here working hard to change the dynamics of families, but it's like pushing water up a hill with a rake every single day. There's a lack of resources, a lack of stability, leadership changes, money and investments being wasted on projects that do not take off. It's also a divided place. There are some areas in Middlesbrough living in peace and likely to go about their day blissfully unaware of what's going on in the areas of deprivation and extremities, the small hotspots that can totally overload the whole town. Finally, I love my job, says Chloe, and just remember, where some see a thug, I see a child who is vulnerable and has lost their way. That is going to be part of the explanation of the broader phenomenon, not of the specifics, I don't think, to Middlesbrough. Maybe I need to get over that, but it fascinates me and upsets me. I don't think it's a coincidence that crime has risen in these areas, writes Mike in Middlesbrough, as the steelworks have declined over the past couple of decades. If young men had access to well-paid, secure jobs like previous generations, I think fewer would be getting involved in crime. I think that's probably a gimme, isn't it, Mike? A lot of the areas in Middlesbrough where we're seeing the problems today were originally built as communities for steel workers and their families. And yet you could say the same about parts of the East Midlands and the coal mines, parts of Yorkshire and the coalfields there, North Wales, all of the industrial heartlands of this country. Sheffield, where the steelworks were absolutely enormous, huge employers. My maternal grandfather was employed in Sheffield Steel, in the Sheffield steel industry, and it's not there anymore. And those towns, those cities haven't fallen as far as Middlesbrough, with the constant caveat from Chloe that, of course, there are good people there and good things happening, and don't write off an entire town because of the activities of a minority. Mark's in Durham. Mark, what would you like to say?
Yeah, well, I live outside the area, but I've worked in the area for about 9 years.
Okay.
And I'm not a local, but obviously I'm looking a little bit from an outsider's point of view. And one of the specifics for this area is it's quite isolated in a strange sort of way.
Go on.
Yeah. So you've got an urban conurbation, a port area. You used to have very big chemical works. ICI used to have massive factories, very well-paid jobs. The steelworks, someone's discussed, when I first came here, they were still standing but idle. They've been pulled down now. And the people I know who family or parents work there, these were very well-paid manual labour jobs for the area, really well-paid. You know, people were earning £30,000-40,000 £10 years ago, which would have been quite a decent wage for.
And that's part of the muscle. That's part of the muscle memory of the town.
Yeah, and they've gone. Yeah. So on the south of it, you've got the south. In the south of it, you've got the North Yorkshire moors, and there is nothing until you get to York and Leeds. There's it's moorland and nice, very nice North Yorkshire moor towns, and then you go the other way. You go to Darlington, which is a bit more affluent, but if you keep going, there's nothing then until you get to the other side of the country, and then you go.
I never would have thought of it in geographical terms.
Well, the northeast is quite isolated. So if you go north of it, you've got County Durham, which has got some problems with its ex-pit villages, which are mostly on the coast, which are tying to Hartlepool. But then I live very close to Durham, and Durham is a World Heritage Site with a world-class university, and it's like chalk and cheese.
Yeah.
And then you go up to Newcastle, is an hour away. Newcastle is quite a diverse, vibrant city, really. It has its problems as well. And I think some of it is related to these people can't get out of there. There's that many of them the people who got out...
You're describing prisoners of geography in a way.
Yeah, I think they may be. As well as... So, so a lot of people I know who contract and go and live away in contract for, in doing building or whatever work stuff, or they work offshore on the gas and oil fields and they come back. And those are the people they've left the area in Thailand. So maybe the people that are left are just not, or some of them anyway, are not really...
Well, there's so many questions, and thank you for having a proper crack at what might be specific to Middlesbrough.
I think that, yeah.
Because people might dispute what you're saying. They can't argue with the map, can they? But they could argue with what you draw from it.
It does affect it. And then the other flip of the coin, for me, is historically, look at Cleveland Police. And they've had quite a few corruption problems. For a small force, they've had quite a few corruption problems. We're talking over 20, 30 years historically. They had a few corruption problems.
And that would involve potentially, and we're not...
Maybe not as effective a police force as they could have been.
But also, of course, corruption generally involves being sympathetic to criminals or being in the pay of criminal organisations. I'm a little bit nervous of going any further on these kind of comments, but we are familiar with what police corruption involves. We've seen it over decades in every corner of the country, and if, as you say, Cleveland has had a particular problem over the years, then it might explain how the kingpins of these organisations have managed to prosper, to thrive, and of course to stay out of jail.
Yeah, and obviously you've got the austerity layered on top. You've got the police again. The formula for how you get your number of police doesn't favour, like the financial formula doesn't favour Cleveland, Teesside anyway. I work in an area quite close to the police, let's just say, without being specific.
Of course.
And I do know that compared to other places, if you look at the people, it's very localised crime.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? A lot of it is very localised. It's the same group of people. It's a churn of the same group. Yeah.
I understand exactly what you're saying. Yeah, and their influence spreads when their activities are not curtailed, and the absence of consequences. Thank you, Mark. That's incredibly helpful. Again, the way this programme works, you can challenge anything that's Mark has said, but it's a fascinating field of academic study, the social consequences of geography, and I would never have crossed my mind that there could be something relevant there. Think about how popular anti-immigration politicians are in seaside towns. It's weird. It is literally weird. You go to somewhere like Clacton, there isn't any immigration, and yet they love the racists down there. The racist politicians always do well in those kind of areas. Yarmouth as well, hardly any immigration. In fact, didn't the MP for Yarmouth see a charity boat race going off just off the coast, and Rupert Lowe started posting on social media about how the place was being invaded, and it turned out it was people raising money for cancer research in a big canoe or something like that. These people get elected in towns like Yarmouth. So geography is relevant. It plays some part in the psychology. So why wouldn't it be relevant to these sort of questions as well? 10:42 is the time. As a borough resident and retired police officer, I'm getting a lot of texts from people who are very, very clear that they do not want me to mention their names. This is a culmination of social services, Sure Start and policing cuts. Just take a look at the police funding formula, James. Cleveland is grossly underfunded when you look at the levels of crime and antisocial behaviour that it suffers from. The funding model relies on the council tax precept, but Teesside doesn't have the house prices to yield the level of precept that somewhere like Surrey or North Yorkshire has. Therefore, the force with the worst crime rates ends up with the least relative funding. You see, there are some things that are specific to Middlesbrough. Obviously, it's more complex than that, but this is a big issue. We work so hard in Cleveland Police, but it is just overwhelming. And then in capital letters, please don't say my name. There aren't many people with my name working in Cleveland Police, so I will just delete that one as well so that I don't accidentally glance at it in a moment. 10:43 is a time. Dan's in Kendal. Dan, what would you like to say?
Hi, just that, first of all, I'm a big defender of Middlesbrough. Good. In a sense of an urban place. I kind of lived there from 2003 to 2008. I'm not from there, from the Lake District, but, I kind of came to love the place in a kind of rough and ready fashion. So, yeah, I'll put that first.
Very good.
So first of all, Middlesbrough has always been rough as a part of Teesside. So Teesside is like an entire valley. You've got, Grangetown on the other side. You've got the, half of Middlesbrough was knocked down in about 2006 on one side of the railway. And they built a boho, which was part of this kind of urban development plan by the former mayor, Ray Mallon.
Okay.
And he was called Robocop.
So the zero tolerance type guy.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So the interchange between politics and police there has been going on for, I don't know, at least 20 years since I was there. I can't really speak on behalf of Cleveland Police and all that kind of stuff. I don't really know anything about that.
You don't have to. You're giving me your perspective. It's really interesting.
So, deprivation has been a key part of central Middlesbrough. And where the ramming happened or where the house was set on fire, these are estates further towards the coastal side of it. A Grangetown, a South Bank. I mean, even when I was there, we were warned never go down South Bank. It's rough as out.
Right.
Even in central Middlesbrough, TS1, they knocked down half of the terraced houses to try and fix the whole deprivation problem because it became, a massive area for urban deprivation. They, in the 2005-6 period, central government decided to send loads of refugees up there. So there was a huge Kurdish community they're building. There's a huge Arab community that's been built up over the years. So there's that aspect to it. What else?
A lot of this would apply to most towns, but not the historical. The geographical and the historical is really interesting, and not least the fact that you describe deprivation as being a generational issue. It's bedded into families, and that's going to be true in small pockets up and down the country. But it's almost as if the pockets in Middlesbrough have sort of joined together, and now you've got big pockets that can define the air of a whole town.
But the problem with Teesside, in a sense, and I always thought this because I'm not from that side of the country, is that they'll build new areas en masse. There's other sides of, there's like Hartlepool and, there's Middlesbrough, there's Stockton, there's Yarm. Yarm is one of the richest places in the country, and it's only about 3 miles away from the middle of Middlesbrough.
Right. And that presumably is why they keep returning this Mayor Houchin, because there are votes elsewhere in the country that are traditionally conservative, and the areas that you're talking about, the deprived areas, are just forgotten about, entirely forgotten about, both in terms of policing and in terms of provision.
Yeah, I mean, and also I think, Middlesbrough is an example of urban design testing for maybe 70 years, since the 1950s.
I didn't know any of this.
Yeah, it's a really interesting urban layout, if you put it like that. So,
and so you've got that coupled with where it sits on the map of England, and all of these things could be contributing factors to the specifics of what is going on. You mentioned Hartlepool. John's there. He writes, historically, Borough is only there because the railway needed a port to ship out the coal from the Durham coalfields. Then it got another huge expansion when ironstone was discovered in the Cleveland Hills. But as soon as steel replaced iron, the hills became less useful. The coalfields declined, leaving it with just imported materials for steel making. Global steel overproduction left it a town without an industry, and the chemical works are small in comparison and highly specialised. So many different dimensions, but all dimensions of decline and all moving in the same direction. And then failure of politics. None of this excuses anything. Most of us like to think that even if we'd grown up in hideous circumstances, we'd never go around setting fire to houses or causing the death of police officers. But it explains. You need to try to understand things. And I'm coming a lot better. It's extraordinary, really, to reflect upon how many different answers there are to these questions. And to my surprise, the specifics of Middlesbrough are coming in thick and fast, as opposed to the reality of hypervigilance, living in a state of fear because the streets on which you live are not safe because of people who are not you. I've still got room for that testimony as well. But the question of why is Middlesbrough in the state that it's in? We'll be speaking to the leader of Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council in the course of the next hour of the programme. He will perhaps want to challenge some of what has been said already and add to the general sense of trying to understand, because I take on board what Tommy said at the outset about other towns taking the lead and jostling for the lead. But if you look at the sort of towns that are always there or thereabouts, there must be something specific or peculiar to them that explains the criminality, the danger, and the lack of safety. And if you're just joining us, Middlesbrough is measurably the most dangerous place to live in England and Wales. It's 10:49.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I don't think this is one for the phone-in, but what are they going to do when they get there? This task force of 200 specialist police officers that is being deployed to crime-ridden Middlesbrough in an attempt to restore order, I read on the front page of one newspaper today. That's a policing question. Maybe I should have added that to the list at 10 o'clock. What do they do when they get there? Start rounding up the usual suspects? I honestly don't know. I mean, they are specialists, so presumably they know what they are doing. But what are they going to do specifically when they get there? Doesn't sound like a lot, 200, but something has got to give. I know one more text, then I'll talk to Joe, who's in Middlesbrough. But the thing that made me look something up, whenever you tell me it wasn't reported by mainstream media, I think it usually is. So when you wrote this was not reported in the mainstream media as it only affected brown people, and another one saying, please don't mention my name, you're talking about the Farage riots. You're talking about the violence that unfolded up and down the country after some public figures spread misinformation and obvious lies about the terrible killings in Southport. And I just thought I'd refresh my memory on whether or not Middlesbrough was part of that. And it was. About 1,000 people on the streets in Middlesbrough alone. And that footage you may remember of some knuckle dragger stopping traffic and asking drivers, are you white, are you English? That was in Middlesbrough. So you can see why certain politicians have got absolutely nothing to say about this outbreak of violence, can't you? Perfectly feasible that the crossover between those who were on the streets during the Farage riots and those committing the crimes or part of the problems that we're talking about now may be considerable. Are you white, are you English? That's our country, you know. That was in 2024. He got jailed, but he was on the streets of Middlesbrough, stopping traffic, going, are you white, are you English? Phew. 10:55 is the time. And these, of course, are the people that are groomed and gaslit by the kind of politicians that like to pretend that London is a especially dangerous place compared to the rest of the world, when the statistics tell us the polar opposite. All of this matters because you're not going to fix things if you lie about the problems. And, of course, we're living in an era where some of the most successful politicians are among the biggest liars. Joe is in Middlesbrough. Joe, what would you like to say?
Hi there. First time I've been on the show, but I listen a lot.
Thank you.
I'm from Middlesbrough. I'm deeply proud of my town.
Good.
I was a director in the steel industry when it fell in 2015, so I've seen firsthand, lost my job, and set up my own business as a result of that. At the same time being told in media that it was the worst place to grow up as a female. I don't know whether you're aware of that.
No, I wasn't aware of that statistic.
It was all over national news as well.
When was that? What era was that?
That was about 10, 15 years ago. It was a national report, and it said Middlesbrough's the worst. I haven't experienced that. I'm going to say I love the place where I live.
Good.
We've got the Cleveland Hills, we've got the North York Mills, we've got Saltburn, we've got the most beautiful coastline, and a great football team. and I don't recognise the reports that I'm seeing. I just don't. And maybe I'm a privileged person. I don't know. Maybe I've just don't see it enough. I go into Middlesbrough quite often. I used to have an office there until I moved out. But it's like any declining town. I mean, I've got friends all over the country. I lived in Salford for many years when I was going through university, and I saw crime every day. There was people murdered on my street. My house was burgled.
Manchester is the third on the list, actually, of the most dangerous cities in the UK. And yet, you've heard the phone in today, Joe, and there have been some. And I don't want anybody to come away from this thinking that Middlesbrough is all bad, but there have been some really interesting ideas on what may be peculiar to Middlesbrough to explain what is measurable. That it is, and listen, it sounds awful. It's the most dangerous place in England and Wales, and it will be close, and it will be relatively small percentages. But 150 crimes per 1,000 people, that's notable.
But I think if you look at those statistics, it's probably been the same report year on year for the last few years. We've always been in the top 2 or 3. I don't think something drastically has happened.
No, I give you that. I grant you that. But why do you think it is?
Because we're an impoverished area. We've got a lot of, our biggest. When I was growing up, you either went in the steel industry, you went in the chemical industry. They were absolutely enormous. And both of them we've no longer got. So I was presented by Saveed Javid when the Teesside Task Force came to town to kind of try and save the steel industry, saying we need more sustainable industries in the North East and on Teesside. And I was like, what sustainable industries?
Just a trendy word.
We know what to do.
Not backed up with anything meaningful or substantive.
Generations and generations of people from Grangetown, where the little girl died, where all they knew was steel. It's right opposite.
Yeah, but that's not coming back, is it, anytime soon?
No, never. I mean, once you shut the blast furnace and they've knocked it down now.
How significant do you think that is? Because this is really hard for people who are not from the industrial heartlands of the country to understand. It leaves something in the air. Where we talked a lot yesterday about security in the context of the changing job market and a job for life and the comfort that was provided by that. I can't join the dots between that being taken away and criminality taking a hold. Can you?
No. I can't.
I can begin to. You can sort of think, well, I deserve better and I can't get it legally. I deserve better because this is a town where we used to have better. We used to have more. Yeah. I can't get it legally, therefore I'm going to try and get it illegally. Whereas if the town had never known good days, that I don't know. I'm spitballing.
Yeah. I mean, there could be a lot of that in there. Obviously, the rise of social media whipping up some of this information as well. I'm so proud of my town. I'm devastated by what's happening at the moment in terms of
so you can be devastated while not witnessing it or recognising it. You know that it's happening because we see the stories and we see the heartbreaking photographs of the
I know that everybody I know is just proud of the town and wants to be proud. We're a very proud town.
I got, as I say, a very, very good friend of mine is Middlesbrough born and bred, and he's like you, very, very proud of his town. It's horrible to see this.
Well, we've had some fabulous people come from here.
Go on, let's end the conversation with a few reminders. Bob Mortimer, Brian Clough.
Bob Mortimer's our legend. Yeah, absolutely.
He's one of yours, isn't he, Clough?
He is. Yeah, absolutely, he was. Yeah, absolutely. Wendy Richards, my friend Kirsten O'Brien, various people. So we've got some fabulous people from here. We just
having a nightmare at the moment, and something must be done. That's a sort of refrain of armchair politicians throughout the ages. I'm glad you got on, Joe. I'm glad you got on with a little slightly warmer analysis, but no denial. There's no sticking your fingers in your ears or closing your eyes about what's going on. And it turned out to be worth asking about what might be or what is, in your view, specific to Middlesbrough. Good Lord. It is 11 o'clock. We'll move into slightly lighter territory, I think, moving forward. Well, maybe not, actually. I do want to talk about cowboy builders. Do you?
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 11. Can I just take a quick moment? Thank you for that. I could have done that phone-in on Wednesday or Thursday, and I didn't because I didn't think it would work. And then as Friday came around, I sort of thought, well, come off it. Since when do you do things on this programme? When do you not do things because you don't think they'll work? I just didn't think we'd get enough insight into Middlesbrough. And that's partly why I also offered you the opportunity to tell me what it was like growing up or living in criminal-controlled areas outside Middlesbrough. But I should have had more faith in you. That's a lesson for us all. So thank you. I mean that most sincerely. Turn our attention next to something that can affect absolutely anybody, except for, and I don't want you to hate me for this, except for those of us who think, oh, that could never happen to me. I'm too savvy. I always think that the people who own up to being victims of online scams, it's only really interesting if you can't quite believe that they were a victim of an online scam. Do you see what I mean? It's like you want somebody like Martin Lewis to be the victim of an online scam in order to really get it across how good the scammers are at scamming people, because Martin gets up extremely early in the morning and never misses anything. In fact, his face is used to conduct online scams. You see what I mean? If it's your Auntie Doris who struggles to remember what day it is and she's been ripped off online, it's a bit dog bites man, right? Do you see what I mean? Whereas if it was, I don't know, someone very, very clever, savvy and smart, who do you think of when I say very, very clever, savvy and smart? Who do you think of? Oh, that's very kind of you, but I think I reference myself on the programme far too much as it is. Someone very, very clever, savvy and smart who got ripped off, who got scammed, then that becomes man bites dog. That becomes much, much, much more newsworthy. And I suffer a little bit from thinking, if you have been a victim of cowboy builders, then it's probably your fault a bit. And then you realise how easy it is. How easy it is to happen. You could hire builders because you've got a word-of-mouth recommendation and they did a perfectly good job for your friends, but they did a very different job that they were up to doing, and then they come round yours and quote you and tell you, yeah, we can do that. We can do you a loft. So they've done your friend's downstairs toilet extension. I don't think I ever told you that that's what I built in my days on a building site. I was building a downstairs toilet extension in Doncaster for a man who'd had an industrial accident and couldn't get upstairs anymore, so they needed to build a toilet for him downstairs, a toilet and a shower room. That's what I did. That was my 2 weeks on a building site in South Yorkshire. So if, for example, I'd just done that and I came off the back of it and you said, you just had some builders in, didn't you, Keith? Did they do your they did your downstairs toilet extension, didn't they? And you'd go, yes, James, that's absolutely right. And I said, well, I need my loft doing. Do you think would you recommend them? And you'd go, yeah, they were really good, actually. They had this weird bloke who was working with them. I think he might have been a public school boy. Couldn't lift a bag of sugar, let alone the breeze blocks that he was required to lug around the place every day. But apart from him, they were all great. They really got the job done. So I ring you up. I say, excuse me, I need a loft conversion. Could you come round and do it? And you say, yes, certainly. That'll be £50,000. You've got no idea. You just think you're going to be okay. You think you're going to wing it. And, of course, after a week or a fortnight, I've got no roof and you've disappeared because you've realised you can't do the job. So that's one way in which it could happen to anybody. And just what I want to do this hour is establish that it could happen to anybody, right? That's the thing. And not that you need to be gullible or you need to be greedy or you need... Well, unless you want to tell me that you do. Maybe as a builder, you don't understand how anyone can be the victim of a cowboy builder, because if you did your due diligence and if you dotted your I's and crossed your T's, you would be able to avoid that particular plight. But I would prefer to establish the idea that it could happen to anybody, and the best way of doing that is by asking what happened to you. 0345 6060 973. Why are we talking about this? Because Andy Burnham is going to war against cowboy builders. It's not exactly a difficult target, is it? It's a lovely target to... But who's going to sit here and say, why is he going after cowboy builders when he should be going after them over there? I mean, it's a lovely politically live issue. Cowboy, I don't know, and this may be one of the questions that I add to my list. I don't know quite what this is going to look like, how easy it would be to do this. But he has written in the Daily Mail, so he's really chasing those votes, and he's written they're crooks, and it's about time we treated them like it. So today we're putting the cowboys out of business. They prey on the vulnerable, they rob our neighbours of their futures, and above all, they destroy lives. I think he's right, by the way, for the avoidance of any doubt whatsoever. And I think what they're going to do is insist that you sign up to a thing called Trustmark, like a kind of government-endorsed quality scheme. There are already quality schemes out there, of course, but the government-endorsed one will set the bar higher. And then they're going to have an approved code scheme for the home improvement sector. So you would find yourself in a situation where if you employed anybody who hadn't got these badges, then you would only have yourself to blame. They're trying to create the idea, to create a world in which it would be impossible to be ripped off because it would be so easy to check that the people that you were employing were kosher. I'm not sure it will work. That's a question that perhaps only people in the trade will be able to tell me, but I do know this. I think it could happen to anybody. And what happened to you? Some of you are disputing the description of a toilet extension as being a building site. Well, of course it's a building site. It was a site and we were building something. I apologise if I gave you the impression that I was building a multi-storey car park or some major international infrastructure, building an outside toilet. Well, it wasn't an outside toilet, was it? It was an inside toilet, but we were outside when we were building it. It's 10 minutes after 11. I just want to know what happened to you. I sometimes turn to a subject after the one that we discussed in the last hour and think that this is lighter territory. It's not, is it? It's not, because the example that Andy Burnham provides is a woman who was driven to attempt suicide by an unscrupulous tradesman. Her home was left unsafe to live in. So I want you to tell me about the toll it takes, the psychic toll it takes because there's so much going on here, isn't there? You're going to feel really stupid. And that's probably not at the forefront of your thinking or your feeling. The forefront of your feeling is fear. I can't afford to fix this. They've gone. I've got no recourse. That's another element of the conversation. What do you do when you find out you've been ripped off? What support is there? What help is there? I presume your insurers will wriggle like a fish on a hook to avoid giving you the money that you think you deserve. So in what order do you put these feelings? You start with anger, right? And then fear. Fear and anger, oddly, are very hard to separate. Yoda knew what he was talking about. What he was talking about, Yoda knew. You've got anger and fear, I would say quite hard to separate. And then you've got embarrassment, shame. In fact, that's often quite hard to separate as well. You've got the whole lot here, haven't you? Anger, fear, shame. How can I have been ripped off? You know, I'm a gob on a stick radio presenter. I'm a business director, I'm a company director, I'm a doctor. How could I have been ripped off? I'm far too clever to be conned. And you got conned. Tell me how. How does it work? Does it escalate? You don't hand over £50,000 on day one and they blow your house up. You kind of think, I don't know about that, but they must know what they're doing. I really suffer from that. Do you suffer from that? Oh, they must know what. I haven't got a clue. I have two things when I've got builders in. Number one, my accent goes south. I start sounding like the lost Mitchell brother. And number two, I believe almost everything they tell me. Thank God I married a woman who is considerably wiser than me. But that's what you do. You think that, well, they know what they're talking about. I take my car in for a service. I don't start telling the mechanics what to do. If I've got builders in my house, I don't start telling them what to do. So that would be part of it, right? You'd be concerned, but almost talking yourself out of saying anything. 03456060973. If you're in the trade, you must hate these people even more than their customers do, because they get everybody a bad name. I'm quite a trusting guy, and I've been pretty lucky. I had a couple of wobbles. I had an awful lot of work done on my various homes over the years, because we quite like what they call fixer-uppers. But I haven't had any absolute nightmares. And I think probably more through luck than judgment, or through Mrs. O'Brien's wisdom as opposed to mine. The old sucking the teeth with the pen behind your ear, it's not going to be... I've got no idea how much that should cost. I'm going to believe whatever you tell me. I told you, didn't I? I've got a fling in the middle of my garden, which has been a godsend, actually, in recent weeks, because the middle of my lawn is bright green, would you believe? That's because we've got a runoff. I didn't really understand what he was telling me, but he said we're going to get a digger. We're going to get a digger in your back garden. We can drive it through the garage because it opens at the front and the back. And I said, can I have a go on it? And he said, yes. And I said, well, let's do it. That's how I decided. I didn't know what a runoff was. I didn't even know whether we needed it. I just knew I was going to be able to have a go on this little mini digger. He dug a big hole in the middle of the lawn, and it's got some kind of, well, it's got a water thing in it, like a runoff, so that our drains don't overflow when there's torrential rain. And that means there's a reservoir of water under our lawn. So our lawn looks like a sort of fried egg with the colours all wrong. The outside of the lawn is yellow, and the middle of the lawn is bright green. I've no idea. I don't know how that happened. I must have been in charge that day. And Mrs. O'Brien comes home and says, what's going on in the back? Oh, so we're building a runoff so that the drains don't overflow. Anyway, take a picture of me in the digger. Go on, quick, take a picture of me. Wee, Bob the Builder. So I probably should have got ripped off at some point over the last 20 years, and by a miracle and a combination of luck and circumstance, I haven't. I want you to tell me how it happened to you. All right? 0345 60 973. I want the how of it. And then I want the what it feels like. The how of it. That's the thing that you don't know unless it's happened to you. Because we don't even know what it means to be left with a house that's uninhabitable. At what point would you have realised that this was all going wrong? And they've carried on doing it. They haven't disappeared. They've carried on making things worse. So tell me what happened to you. And be absolutely certain of one thing. I don't think it was your fault. I don't think, even looking back, I'm not sure you could have done anything differently. You're welcome to tell me that you could have done, but I don't think it's a given by any stretch of the imagination that you need to be vulnerable or gullible or slow on the uptake or too trusting or any of those things. I want to know what happened to you when these people that Andy Burnham is promising to pursue come into your life and rip you off. 0345 6060 973.
James O'Brien on LBC.
18 minutes after 11. Thank you to... It's funny the things that prompt you to get in touch with me, you know. I can sit here for hours going, please ring me on a matter of major international importance, and there's nothing. And then I accidentally describe something as a runoff when it is in fact a soakaway, and my inbox explodes. I did not pretend to know what I was talking about. What I've got is a soakaway. Victoria, and I know, as Keith has pointed out, I did used to be a builder, so you'd think I would know better, wouldn't you? It's there to stop rainwater runoff by soaking it away. Basically, it's a big pipe laid vertically and full of gravel. So it's not a reservoir or indeed a runoff. It's a big pipe laid vertically and full of gravel so that the water soaks away. So that's where our drains go, it's where our gutters go, and it means they never overflow when there's really, really heavy rain. It also means the middle of my lawn is luscious and verdant for reasons that it took me ages to work out. I thought maybe next door was breaking the hosepipe ban and inexplicably firing it over the fence into our garden. But I mention that because I could have been ripped off and I wasn't. And if I had been ripped off, I don't think it would have been my fault. So I want to know what happened to you. It's 19 minutes after 11 and Sharon is in Hurstpierpoint. Sharon, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, James, I've spoken to you before about much more serious matters about Russia and stuff like this, but I have dreamt about having an opportunity to speak to you about this because my husband and he's nearly 80, I've just turned 70, and 10 years ago we started on a project to build a house for our retirement in a village where we could get buses, trains, and have things if we couldn't drive any longer. We thought we were trying to be a bit proactive.
Yes.
Anyway, 10 years later, James, we have a house which is so defective. It has come in at possibly at least 50% more than the price that we budgeted for, has taken all our life savings, and we have been left with a house that isn't yet signed off. We've lived in it for nearly 4 years, but it's not yet signed off by building control. I have done everything, James, to try and bring the people responsible to book, but I cannot. I've tried the Royal Institute of Chartered Surveyors, because an architect surveyor company we hired to manage our project because we didn't feel that we were capable of doing it ourselves. They selected the builders. They then later on in the build, when the house wasn't finished, told us to terminate the builder's contract, which left us high and dry without any warranties, guarantees, information, nothing at all.
And this was from scratch, this project?
From scratch.
So when did you smell, what was the first rat you smelled?
Well, the first rat we smelt was Well, a difficulty in the relationship with the builder himself, who was very difficult to deal with. But we plodded on with that because we thought, the end, we were trying to see the end game, and we thought that possibly, he was going to come good in the end. But some of the defects are really, really major. For example, we spent thousands of pounds because we got private sewage here, we had to spend a lot of money on our drainage and sewage system to have it designed by a special engineer. The builder completely ignored the design, bought a sort of Tesco value tank which wasn't up to the job, and just put it in the wrong place. And yet it was signed off by building control. The drainage and sewage system was signed off by building control, and the council has now found it to be not fit for purpose.
This is actually quite heartbreaking. How much money do you think you've spent that you shouldn't have spent?
Well, the budget for the house was around about, I think it was originally supposed to be around about £700,000.
Right.
And we reckon now that we have probably spent we've had to borrow money against the house because we're so old we can't get a mortgage anymore.
Yeah.
That was another 200,000, so we're up to 900,000, and we reckon another 500 on top of that, which cleaned us out completely.
So nearly £1 million, so £700,000 plus.
Yeah.
I don't know what to say.
And I'm being very public about this, and I know that there will be people in Hurstby Point in this village who are hearing this, and local people, and I'm glad they're hearing it, because I just can't believe. We went to a specialist construction lawyer,
yes,
and she said we had a really, really strong case.
Right.
But she said, and I would love to bring this case to court for you. But she said, unfortunately, there is no justice in this country anymore unless you've got deep pockets, and it will cost you between 150 and 300,000 to get this to court.
Even with the very good prospect of winning, that's a prohibitive sum of money to ring fence, or presumably you haven't got it.
No, especially when you can't borrow anymore. We can't borrow anymore.
Some of the plans, I don't think Andy Burnham is coming to your rescue anytime soon. I think he's going to prevent people from ending up in the position that you've ended up in.
Yes.
But I don't think he's going to be able to do much to make your life any easier. When can I ask you a couple of questions that you might not like, and if you don't want to answer them, then feel free not to.
Yeah.
How long do you think you were in denial for? When did you and your husband finally accept that this was an absolute disaster?
When we were homeless, because we were supposed to be moving into our house in time for our only daughter's wedding, and it was nowhere nearly finished, and we were homeless, and we were sofa surfing and going round, to various friends who were away on holidays' houses.
Yeah, that would focus the mind, wouldn't it?
And also, we were paying so much money for our furniture being storage. We said we'd like to move our furniture into the house, because at least there was a part of it where it would be safe to be in the house.
Yeah.
So the furniture was moved in. All our belongings, apart from what was portable and we were moving around to different places, were with us. Everything was in the house. It was coming on for the autumn and going into the winter. And the builder would not let us have the combination lock to get into the site or a key to get in the door. And the architect surveyor didn't have any more success in trying to get it from him either.
Do you think he was trying to hide from you the state of the property?
I honestly, I don't.
No idea. And that's my final question: is what was he telling you throughout this process when you were?
Well, he didn't want to speak to us.
But he was still on site. He was still there every day.
Well, no, his site manager was there.
Yeah, that's what I mean. What were they telling you? Whoever you could speak to, and you were saying this isn't right. What were they telling you?
So they were telling us that they couldn't work with the architect surveyor, and the architect surveyor was saying they couldn't work with them.
And at the time, you weren't quite sure which side to pick?
Yeah, I think it did get very difficult to pick, yeah.
Wow. I'm so sorry. I mean, I wish I could say something a little bit more helpful to you, but I can't. That's an absolute shocker. And as far as you can tell, So so you're in the house now, but you keep finding things wrong with it, or there are big things?
Well, there are really, really big things. We've tried to sort out the sewerage situation, because in the first winter that we lived in the house, we had the septic tank emptied about 18 times in the first year, and one of those times it was twice in 1 week. And if we didn't empty it,
you weren't using the lavatory.
No,
of
and
course
there was
not.
only the two of us.
Yes.
So groundwater was getting into the septic tank, and then it was overflowing and taking contaminated water down the lane, which is a public footpath and also access to our neighbour's house. So it became a public health issue.
And in your mind, this is all the builder's fault?
In my mind...
Well, no, in reality as well. I'm just looking for because this is a phone-in about cowboy builders.
Yeah. It is the builder's fault, but it's also the architect surveyor who was supposed to keep them on a tight rein and look after us as their clients. Yeah,
you've been you've been robbed, I think. And I can say that because you haven't identified anybody, but... from what you have shared with us, that is an absolute horror story. And you sound, completely... the word I want is competent, as somebody who would not expect to be ripped off. You knew what you were doing. You hired the right people. It just is extraordinary. That's why they're called cowboys, because it's the Wild West. That's what Sharon has just described. The absolute absence of consequence, recourse to the law, imposition. Unless you've got £250,000 in your back pocket, you can't even go after them. That's mad. Your story doesn't have to involve those kind of sums, by the way. I mean, that is an eye-watering amount of money, but the principle is the same. The principle is the same. And the how does it happen? Politeness, part of the problem. You're probably too polite. You should be laying down the law. Squeaky wheels get the most oil, sharp elbows, all of that. But, you're either built like that or you're not. Ah, dear. 27 after 11 is the time. And let's see if anyone's had more joy getting money back. I mean, is Sharon's experience typical? Or can you actually share a story about small claims court? You're not going to get 700 grand in a small claims. But you take my point. Gurpreet's in Rochester. Gurpreet, what would you like to say?
Hi, James. First-time caller, long-time listener.
Welcome.
Thank you. So I had a situation where I was recommended by word of mouth by someone. I then checked them on the usual online portals to see if they had any good reputation, and they did. Yeah. I then hired them to do a couple of small jobs, which they were competent in doing. They didn't take any money up front, which is always a good sign when somebody's got enough money to do the job themselves. I then had a bigger project, which involved getting a kitchen changed. And the chap had said to me he'd got one of those trade cards. And if I transferred the money to his trade card, he could get a good discount. And I thought, well, that makes sense. So £8,000 transferred over. I then went away for business, and it was a property which was a buy-to-let property. He apparently was getting on with the work. I had to come back early, went to visit the property, found him living in the property, sleeping in the property. None of the work had been done. I then kind of, confronted him, and he said... Yeah, exactly. And he said, well, my missus has kicked me out, and came up with all sorts of excuses. Then followed a number of days of him promising to get on with it. Eventually, he basically disappeared. I then managed to...
He's still got your £8,000?
It's still got my £8,000, yes.
And he hasn't charged it, so he owes you rent as well, technically, but I presume you were going to let that slide.
Yeah, the £8,000 would have been good enough. Yes, I agree. Yeah, it's a buy-to-let, but that's going a bit too far. Yeah. So I then went to small claims court. I represented myself, and as a landlord, you learn to represent yourself after a while. Just you learn how to some of the court system. So he had a CCJ issued against him by the judge. I then he wouldn't pay. We had to go to the High Court bailiffs, and there's one particular company which does the if you don't pay, we'll take it away type of situation. I went to that particular company. They then pursued him, sent agent round there a few times. He then started paying, and
that's a nightmare.
Yeah, he started paying. I think it was on an £8,000 debt. He was offering £25 a month.
I'm sorry to laugh, but goodness me.
I know, it makes me laugh when I think about it.
£25 a month. So he'd spent it all.
Yeah, exactly.
And what? How much of it have you got back now?
Well, the thing is, the company I employ, the one you see on TV, a lot of people don't know this, but whatever they get from the debtor, they keep half of it.
Wow.
And they give you the other half until their costs are covered. Okay, so he was paying £150 a month eventually, and I was getting 75 of that. And out of a total of 8,000, I think I got about £250 back. And then there's a thing called a writ of control, which expired. And basically, the company that was representing me said, well, your writ of control is expired. You have to go back to court now to get another one. And the expense associated and the time associated with that. So that's where the current situation is.
So you can see why Andy Burnham's targeted it. Are you still friends with the person that recommended him?
I am. Yes, it wasn't their fault.
No, right. Well, it does sound as if he might have been all right. This guy, his life fell apart just when he was supposed to be sorting out your kitchen. And I'm not making excuses for him, but your friend recommended him in good faith, and then events rather overtook things. Crikey! I mean, it's not much consolation, but if poor old Sharon was in a hole for over £700,000. So you small fry in comparison. But I mean, you sound quite chill about it now. Briefly, because I'm late for the news. Is there any embarrassment involved?
At the time, very much so. But it's been a couple of years now, and now kind of see things in more perspective. Yeah,
I mean, we all do. We all mellow with the passage of time. But in the middle of it, you'd be like, how can I? I'm not the kind of person that gets ripped off. Flipping heck. 11:32 is the time. A lot of you are asking me about this lake that's been renamed, supposedly, in the United States of America. Simon Marks will be joining me after the news headlines to talk us through what's going on there. No prizes for guessing who is having a massive hissy fit and deciding to rename lakes. Here's Dominic Ellis with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It is 25 minutes to 12. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where once again I invite you to sit in on the mutual support network that Simon Marks and I have established in order to deal with the fact that it is close to impossible to report on or chronicle the madness of Donald Trump in any traditional, recognisable or rational way, because I'm almost a challenge to my vocabulary sometimes. Simon seems up to the challenge, but I'm not sure I am. I can't find the words. Here's one. Here's a new phrase that I haven't used before. There is no act too childish for him. He would never rule anything out on the grounds that it's too childish. Have a listen to him talking in the Oval Office. This is Donald Trump, not Simon Marks, talking in the Oval Office yesterday.
The purpose of this, more than anything else, is we're going to be changing the name of Lake Ontario, effective immediately, to Lake America. That's going to take place right now as I sign the order. Do you have anything to say about it, Ben?
Yes, sir. So this is a straightforward but important executive order. It directs Secretary Burgum and the Department of the Interior to update the Geographic Names Information Service to reflect that the lake once known as Lake Ontario will, from this day forward, be known as Lake America. This is a lake that has most of its volume in the United States. The deepest parts of the lake sit in United States territory, so this will reflect that this is an American lake.
Thank you.
Literally, it's like writing your name on something in a Sharpie, isn't it? And going, right, that's called Donald's house now.
Absolutely. Well, I was joking earlier in the week. I was saying that listeners I didn't think needed to bring their atlases out and start scratching out Lake Ontario with a felt tip pen and then writing in Lake America. And 24 hours later, he did it, because there's a separate TikTok video that he produced after signing that ludicrous executive order, in which he literally has a copy of the map and he scratches the name out Lake Ontario and replaces it with Lake America. I think you used a very important phrase at the beginning here. You talked about the madness of Donald Trump. I think we have, as the Americans would put it, over the last 24 hours, and arguably earlier than that, I think we've jumped the shark.
Really?
I think that you can't now debate, really, whether he has the mental capacity to serve as President of the United States. Let's put what happened yesterday into context. Today is the 6-month anniversary of the beginning of his war on Iran. It was February the 28th when he made the fateful decision to wage war on Iran. It is now August the 28th. He has no way out. In that Oval Office appearance yesterday, he was asked repeatedly about why his CIA director had travelled to Moscow on a secret mission this week. Was it, as has been reported, to warn the Russians not to attack a NATO member state? And he just waves this away and says, no, I've had talks with Putin. Putin has assured me he's not going to attack NATO. Well, if you look at the congressional website, the US Congress, in its library, has documents that says for many months the Russians have actually been engaged in hybrid actions against NATO member states. He's launched this week this absolutely futile economic D-Day on Iran. There are all sorts of major issues engulfing and beleaguering a president who is now 65 days away from November's midterm elections. And what did he decide to do yesterday? Take an action so puerile, so extraordinarily juvenile, that it is only guaranteed further to crater his approval ratings.
Is it, though?
Yeah.
I mean, this is what you mean by jumping the
Yeah,
chart, is that apart from the odd Daily Mail columnist, no one can pretend now that this is not even worse than all of his worst critics predict.
Well, it's just pathetic.
It's beyond
It's
pathetic.
just, I mean, we went through
You
the whole...
said puerile and juvenile.
Puerile, juvenile, and pathetic.
And infantile and pathetic.
I mean, we
Ridiculous.
went through the Gulf of Mexico thing, right?
What's
He
that
wants
called
the
now?
Gulf of Mexico called the Gulf of America.
Has anyone changed their maps?
Well, Google now on its maps has Gulf of Mexico.
Yeah.
But underneath it in brackets, it has Gulf of America because that is the way that Google says that it indicates disputes over the names of territories. And look, this is, I mean, he said in the Oval Office there, as he was watched on by, among others, Stephen Miller and his Interior Secretary Doug Burgum, both of them absolute slavish sycophants. They've sent official paperwork in. I mean, he is changing what
Where
the
is it?
United States... Where's the paperwork?
No, where's the lake?
Oh, the lake. It's up between the United States and Canada. It's up in Michigan. It's not named, by the way, after Ontario, the state.
No.
I mean, the name Ontario is rooted in indigenous language from hundreds and hundreds of years ago.
Yes, I thought so.
That refers to a beautiful place and gleaming water. So he doesn't even... I mean, he's doing this, of course, because he's attacking Canada again at the end of a week in which, you know, he upended through the good offices or the untrustworthy offices of his Commerce Secretary, Howard Lutnick, the Canadian trade negotiations. So there's a full-scale trade war now underway between the United States and Canada. Mark Carney, as we talked about earlier in the week, kind of schooling leaders all over the world, including, I suspect, possibly our own, about how you deal with Donald Trump, how you confront the reality head-on rather than imagining that there's some way that, you know, you can make all this somehow work out in the end. So, but the reason why I think it's going to, again, depress his approval ratings was two reasons. I mean, first of all, because it's just so obviously ridiculous and stupid.
This is the fascinating thing, isn't it? In that people, because, you know, I'm thinking of some of the phrases that I've heard over the years. It's, oh, he's upsetting all the right people, or I know he's a liar, but I love it because it upsets you and Sadiq Khan. That was directed at me, not at you. Or, yeah, he's so good at baiting. But there comes a point, and you can allow people that, you know, okay, yeah, you're right. You know, if you hate racism, then Donald Trump is really going to wind you up. Or if you hate malfeasance or moral depravity, then yeah, you're right. He is going to upset all the right people. But he's renaming a lake because he's a whopping great man-child. How do you square that with your truck-driving, patriotic, redneck kind of celebrations?
We're 65 days away from midterm elections.
Remember
and
the
the
3rd of
real
November.
thing that is on the minds of Americans this weekend as they head to the supermarket, as they fill their car up with petrol, is the price of his war on Iran.
Yeah.
6 months into a massive military mobilization, the largest since the 2003 US attack on Iraq. And the notion that he is wasting his time with this stuff is not going to play, even with his grassroots supporters who, remember, are now on the receiving end of blandishments from challengers to Donald Trump from within MAGA. People like Tucker Carlson, Marjorie Taylor Greene, even the ousted Congressman Thomas Massie. Last week, he accused them all of being traitors because they'd held a kind of a summit meeting at which they appeared to be discussing their own possible political viability in the future as they position themselves as future challengers for the MAGA leadership. The other reason, oddly, why I think this is going to damage him is because it comes at the end of a week in which the country has united around one unexpected issue, and that is the death of Dolly Parton.
I knew you were going to say that.
A woman who never performed on a political stage, never played a political rally, whose viewpoints were very clear if you listen to her music and you see the occasional things that she said that were political. But the fact that that united the country at a time of total polarisation and tribal division, I think is a further reminder to many Americans of just how far the country has drifted down this hard right, populist, ludicrous path where you just get an atlas out and you scratch out the name of Lake Ontario and you rename it Lake America. That's not solving any problems for anyone, and he's going to pay the price for that in the midterms.
Well, we've been here before. Well, not quite. I mean, I still can't believe he got in again as president, but these midterms, remember the 3rd of November, could be crucial, and it would just mean he then limps. Well, either he limps towards ignominy or he goes absolutely all in on the madness.
Yeah, well, that's my concern.
I know. I mean, you were one of the first people to articulate that.
I think that he's particularly unpredictable and potentially dangerous when he's cornered. And if we look at what the polls are showing, it seems absolutely evident that the Democrats are going to romp to victory in the House of Representatives. And certainly Steve Bannon, his own on-again, off-again political advisor, has been sounding the alarm publicly about his concern that the Republicans may even be about to lose the Senate. And he doesn't blame Trump for that. He blames the Republican leader in the Senate for refusing to pass the Save America Act, which, of course, is the measure that would upend the midterms entirely by suddenly requiring that every single person that casts a vote first has to prove they are an American citizen. And how you would possibly make those arrangements right now, given that we're 2 months away from Election Day, is open to question.
It's funny, because the Tories did something similar, and it backfired, Jacob Rees-Mogg argued. So this presumption that if we introduce voter ID, then it will discriminate against more left-leaning voters. Jacob Rees-Mogg, who, I mean, even a stock clock is right twice a day, so he may have been right about this, he may not. The presumption is that would aid Republicans. It's not necessarily true.
Yeah, well, Democrats fervently believe that it would aid Republicans because they believe that if you introduce voter ID, they believe that is targeted at their core constituencies, or some of them, particularly African Americans and minority voters in the United States that may not necessarily immediately have access to voter ID, have hands on it. The Republicans say that's absolutely ludicrous. Everybody's got a driving license or an alternative ID. You've got the capacity to show up at the polls, and if you haven't, what on earth is wrong with you? So but the Democrats also fear this is part of a broader voter suppression effort that Donald Trump is engaged in, even talking about the possibility, as some of his lieutenants have done, about deploying ICE and the Border Patrol at polling stations because he wants evidence potentially to build the argument that in various parts of the country where Republicans lose, illegal things were taking place at the polls. But the presence of ICE and the Border Patrol would also clearly suppress the vote more likely among Democrat supporters than Republicans.
Got it. Only half of Americans have a passport, give or take.
Passport, yes. Driving license, more.
Of course, but yes, it is.
You're right.
No,
it is absolutely, and half of them have got one. I don't know what the percentage of them is that can't find the passport that they've got, but I suspect that that's quite significant as well.
I'm getting a lot of ribbing for asking you where Lake Ontario was. I didn't realise. I mean, I did realise because we studied it at school. It's one of the 5 Great Lakes.
It's with the Great Lakes.
Yeah, sorry.
Absolutely. No, that's all right.
Michigan, Superior, Ontario. Michigan, Superior, Ontario.
I didn't know we were doing a geography.
Well, hang on. Let's have a listen to that TikTok clip that you were just talking about instead.
So this is Lake Ontario in Canada, and in the United States. But we're going to make a little change. We're going to call it something different than Lake Ontario. We're going to call it Lake America. And all it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. So now we have a lake, and now we have a Gulf. Because we have the Gulf of America, now we have Lake America, without the of. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy Lake America.
He's literally like a kid in that clip with crayons and a colouring book. I mean, that's what it comes across as.
I hadn't heard that.
And then in the Oval Office yesterday, he also muted the possibility that we've got a lake now, we've got a Gulf, the Gulf of America, but we don't have an ocean. So he said yesterday he's thinking that maybe he's going to rename either the Atlantic Ocean or the Pacific Ocean or both of them. And there was no indication that this was necessarily a gag.
Well, you can't say it was a gag.
Well, they will say it was a gag.
But you can't. We can't.
No, absolutely.
We'll be sitting here in a week and then you'd have renamed it Trumption.
The Ocean of America.
The Ocean of America. I mean, the mind. I'm going to play that again because honestly I am. Because, you know, there are still people around who used to use the phrase Trump derangement syndrome to describe those of us who could see pretty clearly what was going to happen. Although I've got to be completely honest, I don't think anybody foresaw things being this pathetic, tragic, infantile, juvenile, all of the above, and somehow also worse.
So this is Lake Ontario in Canada and in the United States. But we're going to make a little change. We're going to call it something different than Lake Ontario. We're going to call it Lake America. And all it takes is a good pen and some intelligence. So Lake Ontario, that's gone. Lake America. So now we have a lake, and now we have a Gulf. Because we have the Gulf of America, now we have Lake America, without the of. Thank you very much, everybody. Enjoy Lake America.
Without the of.
Without the of.
You're back at 4.
I am.
And then you're back tomorrow.
I am tomorrow between 3 and 6, and then Monday between 4 and 7.
And then you're going to have a rest.
A little rest.
Yeah, without the of. Thank you, Simon Marks.
James O'Brien on LBC.
11:53 is the time. That is the clip, isn't it? That's probably the one. After all these years of playing you clips of Donald Trump being Donald Trump, that's probably the one that is most emblematic of his absolute idiocy. Anyway, Alec Brown is the Labour leader of Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council. He's not here to talk about Donald Trump. He's here to talk about Middlesbrough. And I know you were busy this morning, Alec, but we spent an hour trying to work out what is going on in that beleaguered city. So I'll ask you that question first, if I may.
James, and that's why I'm happy that you've invited me on the show. The word beleaguered is a strong one, yes. Certainly people are feeling unsafe in their own homes, and this is why I'm doing the media rounds, because I absolutely want to reassure the people, especially in South Bank and Grangetown, that, you know, myself, the police, Redcar and Cleveland Council, Middlesbrough Council, we're all trying our utmost to achieve exactly that, and is to have, you know, good law-abiding citizens, which makes up the majority of these estates, feel safe in their own home and for their own children.
So what's the backdrop, Alec? Is it? I mean, a background hum of illegality and criminality that has, in the last week, broken through and dominated these regions, these areas, these communities?
Well, the two major incidents that happened is in South Bank and is Grangetown, and the two of the most deprived wards in the entire country. They actually border each other, and to lose 9 lives in the space of 6 days is unprecedented, James. And you can imagine if that had happened within half a mile of your own street, how unsafe you would feel in your own home. And that's exactly what we're trying to achieve. I mean, the national media are following police cars around. I was in an update with the superintendent yesterday, going to every incident. So yes, the episodes that have happened are absolutely serious, and we need swift action. However, police calls to the police, the superintendent reported yesterday, was actually down for the last week than it was the week before. But it's just the heightened presence and exposure that as an area that we're having.
It's impossible.
And this is why Go on, sorry, James.
It's impossible, isn't it, to not be frightened? And yet, statistically, as you say, there's less reason to be frightened this week than there was a month ago. I mean, it's an almighty mess. Can I clarify what you think is going on, or what you know is going on?
Certainly.
Go on.
I most certainly don't want to say that there's less reason to be scared, because 9 deaths within the space of 5 days,
of course,
is absolutely reason for any parent, brother, mother, father to be concerned in their own homes. And this is what we're all working towards and achieving. What people, the most basic right for them to feel safe for their own children in their own homes.
Yeah, I was just referencing the numbers of calls to the police service on that front. But you're absolutely right. The statistics do not influence or indeed control the responses to the horrors that have been witnessed in the last week. Is it rival criminal gangs that are going after each other without any care for the collateral damage? Is that what you think is going on?
I don't want to be in a position where I'm heightening any sort of fears people have, or to speculate. The police asked us, the superintendent that I was in a meeting with yesterday, was doing 20-hour days with their force to ensure the safety of people, by the way, asked us not to speculate. They're not ruling out any links, and I'll let the media be led by what the police are saying.
Well, and I've got no interest in sensationalism or speculation. I just wondered if you might have an insight, but we'll all wait for the authorities to do their job. And speaking of that, finally, Alec, what are they going to do? In terms of the 200 specialist officers that are making their way to the region from nearby forces, what will the on-the-ground operation involve to contain and undo the current crisis?
Well, that's a good question, and we're of course asking for visibility. People always talk about the old traditional Bobby on the beat, and I think that visibility is absolutely what people are craving for. I mean, I will say the Cleveland police response to this day, even without the additional resource, has been nothing short than spectacular. Officers that were 2 or 3 days ago mourning the sudden loss of colleagues were 2 days later on the side of one of the most horrific things any adult wants to see, and that's the death of a child. Within hours, they'd made 2 arrests on that house fire, and so I just want to reassure people out there that Cleveland police are absolutely fighting tooth and nail to ensure that people are safe in their own communities.
And finally, a question that we were wrestling with in the first hour of the programme today, is there anything specific or peculiar to Middlesbrough that explains the statistics tell us that it is currently the most dangerous place to live in England and Wales. We had some fascinating suggestions involving history, involving politics, involving even geography. Do you think there's anything peculiar to Middlesbrough that explains the current crisis?
And when you've got some of the most deprived wards in the entire country, I mean, Redcar and Cleveland Council, we've got I think the 4th or the 5th most children in care per capita. If you look at per capita population, and I don't think it takes an Albert Einstein to work out that if you go through 10, 15, nearly 20 years of austerity, you cut away all that preventative, historic mental health support that was there. Then 10, 15 years down the line, you're going to see young people feeling disassociated, feeling like they haven't got a future. And it's amongst myself, council, local authorities, to win back the hearts and minds of these young people and not to criminalise themselves before their lives even begun.
Yeah, nicely put. Thank you, Alec, and good luck. Alec Brown, the Labour leader of Redcar and Cleveland Borough Council, as you can hear, profoundly concerned about events on his patch, which will continue, I suspect, to dominate the national news agenda for some time. It is now 12 noon. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. It's possibly the final day of the silly season, as journalists have always called this period of August. I don't know. It might extend into next week, but I've got an absolute classic silly season question for you after this.
James O'Brien on LBC.
It's 4 minutes after 12. Listen, this is a haunting story in a way, but also potentially quite an uplifting one. It's up to you, really. I read earlier in the week that the Royal Devon University Healthcare NHS Foundation had suspended births at the hospital that it runs in Barnstaple due to staffing issues. Now, this means that women in North Devon have extremely long journeys to make to give birth. And as a consequence of that, they were offering instruction and guidance on what to do if you found yourself giving birth in your car, or indeed somebody else's car, in the car. I really like this story because it means I can ask you if you've ever delivered a baby. 0345 6060 973. I want to make something absolutely clear. If you're a midwife, you're not allowed to ring in. Unless you weren't on duty and you were somewhere unlikely, like the top of the Empire State Building or down a well. All right? So, I mean, that is essentially going to be the question, because I just find it extraordinary. I was absolutely useless in the birthing ward. I mean, truly useless. Here's the thing. I bet you weren't expecting me to tie this in with the conversation about cowboy builders, were you? But I'm about to. When I said to you I'm very trusting, I presume that they know what they're doing. I'm the same with midwives. As I am with builders, I am with midwives. Now, I'm not aware of many cowboy midwives out there running around without the correct qualifications, spreading mayhem and misery in their wake. But when Mrs. O'Brien was in the business of giving birth, and she was a little concerned about a couple of things, and she wanted me to go and, you know, bang some heads together or make some inquiries, I was not great. I've made up for it since, and I got better in the course of that first labour. But initially I was like, no, I'm sure you don't need to worry, darling. I'm sure they know what they're doing. I'm sure they know that you're okay, because there should be someone here. You know, I'm my contractions of something. And I said, no, don't worry. And then all right, I'll go out. And you go out and everyone's running around. They're all really busy. It's not like you open a door on the labour ward and find 8 midwives sitting around smoking. They're all busy. So you kind of have to interrupt someone in the middle of doing their looking after someone and say, excuse me, no one's seen my wife for about 40 minutes. Could someone come and... So I was shockingly bad at it. It was a combination of basic uselessness and a form of social anxiety. And I don't want to tell anybody how to do their job. I don't even tell Keith how to do his job. And I wish someone would. I just kind of don't have that kind of character. I don't have that mentality. So the idea... Oh, my days, I'm feeling faint just thinking about it. The idea of being in the car... my contribution to becoming a father was passing my driving test. I think I've told you this. I never learned to drive. I just never got round to it. Combination of boarding school and being busy and having a girlfriend who could drive. I never got round to it. So I'm like 30 when Mrs. O'Brien is pregnant with our first child, older than 30, and she says, you're going to have to pass your driving test. I'm not driving myself to the hospital when my waters break. And I thought, crikey, that's feminism. So I went to learn to drive so that I could drive Mrs. O'Brien to the hospital when her waters broke. And that was stressful enough, driving. You know, if you're not familiar with it and you come to it quite late, you're not like one of those boy racers who bombs around the place thinking that he's Nigel Mansell. That's not the great reference, is it, for the youngsters? Thinking that you're Lewis Hamilton. So I was stressed enough driving. Could you imagine if I'd had to pull over? I was having palpitations at the thought of going round a roundabout. Could you imagine if I'd had to pull over and deliver a baby? Sheesh. But you did, and that's why you're going to call me. 0345 6060 973. Typical, writes Vinny. James is doing another pro-Labour story. Round of applause for Vinny, I think, or metaphorically. But yeah, well done, well done. See, Keith, on his toes. Go on. It's not, of course, confined to this corner of Devon. There will be many circumstances in which you didn't get there in time, or the waters broke unexpectedly early, or whatever it may be. I just want to hear the story. And I tell you what I'd really like, is that you thought you were as useless as me. It doesn't have to be a bloke. It could be, it could be your sister or your friend. You delivered the baby. You could perhaps have been on your own. That must be really scary. Not as scary as driving around a roundabout when you've only been driving for 6 months, but still pretty scary to give birth alone. And what do you even... I don't know anything about any of this. 0345 6060 It's not a motoring topic because you don't have to be in the car. You could be anywhere. You could be in a lift or down a well. The point is that you either gave birth alone or you delivered a baby. 0345 6060 is the number that you need. And this is it. I mean, this is why they've had to do it down in Devon. They've had to sort of issue advice on what to do if you don't get there in time. There's an example here from the Devon side of Exmoor, Paracombe. If we'd waited, we probably would have had to have our baby in a car park. She said she would have gone to North Devon District Hospital in Barnstaple, but due to the Foundation Trust suspending maternity services, she had to drive 51 miles to a hospital in Exeter. God, that would have broken me. It was hard enough driving 2.5 miles. Did I ever tell you what happened on the way home from the hospital when I'd been driving for like 10 minutes in total? So I didn't forget how to drive, no. But I was driving home in the early hours of the morning and all the cars coming towards me kept flashing at me. And I kept thinking to myself, how do they know I've just had a baby? Oh, that's so nice. But how do they know I've just had... I was delirious at this point. And of course, I hadn't turned the headlights on. I don't think I'd driven in the dark before. I never turned the headlights on. And all the cars I'm driving around West London, no headlights on. I may have still been suffering the after effects of all the gas and air that I thought I'd better test just to make sure that it wasn't going to do Mrs. O'Brien any harm. I remembered snacks. I didn't realise when I was at the antenatal classes and they said, do remember to pack snacks. I thought they meant for me, so I took a pork pie. I took a pork pie to the... So, as I say, I would have been the last person, human being possible to do a good job of delivering a baby. So you rose to the challenge. Where were you and what did you do? I mean, obviously only want happy stories, I think, on this one, or at least stories that have a vaguely comical dimension. Hit the numbers now, you will get through. 0345 6060 973. Nothing funny about it, of course, if you are scared about what you're going to do and how far you're going to have to drive. But the warnings, you get turned away as well, don't you? You sometimes get told you're not ready yet, you're not sufficiently dilated, or you've come in a little bit early and we haven't got the bed, so you drive home and you go back again. It is very simply the kind of story that used to make the local news or get you on That's Life with Esther Ranson. And you delivered a baby yourself with no training, no background, no knowledge. You just found yourself absolutely, with absolutely no choice. That is the simplest possible inquiry that I can make. Have you ever delivered a baby, or did you give birth on your own? That's even more interesting in a way, isn't it? I can see the circumstances in which it might happen. The thing is, even if you're in France, they calculate the due date differently from how they calculate it here. So it's not like, this is one of the things you only learn when you're going down this path for the very first time. It's not science. Well, it is science, but it's not completely foolproof. It's not reliable. Due dates are written in sand. You've got no real way of guaranteeing that you're going to be in the right place when it happens. It's just that the massive majority of us are. But it has to be done, for the purposes of this conversation, in the absence of any trained professionals. You had to do it yourself. I want to know what it was like, the classic question on this programme. Or you were on your own and you gave birth. It's coming up to 14 minutes after 12. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Josh and Barry will be up first after the next hydration break. And at 12:30 today, I mentioned her yesterday, but it occurred to me on the way home that we really should catch up with Lucy Eastope about the unfolding situation in Nepal. I mean, hideous footage coming out of that borderland between Nepal and Tibet, and the death toll still rising and the missing still missing. But Lucy is one of the people on this planet who flies towards situations like that, whose career has been essentially first instance emergency response. And so I thought we'd have another look at the question of what on earth happens now. How do you begin to help in areas that you can't even get to? What will the emergency responders be doing in Nepal and beyond as we speak? And if anyone can tell us, she can. It's coming up to 12:15. You're listening to James O'Brien on LBC. The time now is 12:15.
James O'Brien on LBC.
What have we done during the silly season this year? Have you ever fainted? What was the other one? So this is the part of the year where the stories are, because Parliament is not sitting, the news agenda is a little bit different from usual. So we did Have You Ever Fainted? And we did one other as well, last Friday or the Friday before. Have you ever fainted? Have you ever... What was the other one, Keith? Am I the only one that pays attention around here? And now we're doing Have You Ever Delivered a Baby? Parliament's back next week. You'll be very relieved to hear. Josh is in Torquay, which isn't far, is it, from the part of the world that we're talking about? Josh, what happened? What's your story?
Hi, James. Long time listener, first time caller.
Well, can I apologise then, please, for never having said before, while you've been listening to the programme, have you ever delivered a baby? Because then you would not be a first. So you could have been on years ago if I'd got around to this before. But better late than never, Josh. Better late than never. What happened?
Yeah. So my lovely girlfriend at the time, wife now, she was at bingo the night before, at 3 weeks till the delivery date. She won £12, which caused her to break her waters. She contacted midwives and stuff. They said, go home because you've got no contractions. Nothing really sort of happened until...
So her waters broke at the bingo?
Her waters broke because she won 12 quid. Yeah.
That sounds like a George Formby song, doesn't it? And because her waters broke, she went to the hospital, and the hospital said, "Don't worry, no, nothing urgent. You'll be fine. Just you come back in a couple of weeks."
Yeah. Basically, nothing sort of come back sort of next afternoon because it would have been waters breaking.
24 hours. Sorry, not a couple of weeks. Of course not.
Yeah, and got to sort of 4:30 the next day, and she sort of was like, "Oh, I'm starting to feel something."
Yeah.
And so I called the midwives up, and they said, "Oh, yeah, we'll send someone round to assess you." But no sooner had I sort of put the phone down to the midwives, she sort of grabbed me by the scruff of the neck and said, "I need to push." So,
what did you? I mean, I know everyone else is interested in your wife in this situation. I'm not. I'm interested in how you felt in that moment, mate, like man to man.
Absolutely terrified. I was in my early 20s, and I'd done a bit of first aid for the job I was working.
Oh, okay.
But nothing, no preparation, no idea what I was doing, and the only thing I ever didn't do was get the name of the guy on the end of the phone to the ambulance people. So I rang the midwives back and just screamed at them down the phone. She says she needs to push.
Yes.
And they said, put the phone down and call an ambulance, and which I did. And
right.
The lovely chap on the phone guided me through everything. I had to tell our older child, who was a toddler at the time, to go and wait in his bedroom while Mummy says a lot of swear words.
Wow. What was it? Sitting room floor?
No, leather sofa.
On the leather. Oh, that's nice. Wipe clean.
It did indeed. No, we got rid of it quite quickly afterwards. But yeah, we had to go and he said, go to the cupboard, wash your hands, grab as many towels as you can. And
right.
I do remember when my wife listens to this later, she'll kill me. But I did say to her, "Oh look, we can use those horrible towels we got, that we don't like." And
good man, I like it. Covering up. So, did you go into autopilot or not?
Yeah, basically, the whole world switched off, and I focused completely on what this guy on the end of the phone was saying, and that was it. I was in the business area catching my second
How long did
son.
It take?
Lou was incredibly... Sorry, that was my wife. She very, very quick from beginning to end, was no more than 35 minutes.
Wow. So the ambulance didn't arrive then, or...?
Literally, they walked through the door as I caught him.
And you went, "What time do you call this?"
To be honest, I didn't notice they were there until they took him out of my hands. So I was a bit too...
How extraordinary.
In the moment, yeah.
Did you
other than
cut the umbilical?
I did, yes, because they were there and took over from them. But
so you did it in a kind of in that way, that kind of...
Yes, yeah. And he other than he was a bit cold because the little darling wouldn't stay still long enough for me to wrap him up in a towel.
Quite tricky, that, actually.
Yes.
Quite wriggly. And, I mean... Did it bring you... I mean, I don't want to ask a silly question now because we've reached the moving bit. I think, I peaked with the wipe clean comment about your leather sofa, and now I want to go back to the caring and genuinely interested in the emotional impact of it all, because I presume it would have brought you closer. I mean, just being there brings you closer, but being the deliverer of the baby, do you think it brought you closer? Do you think it changed the kind of dynamic slightly in that moment?
In that moment, yes, it was quite a wow. This is my son. I mean, I'd already had one son at this point, but we.
Yeah, but she did all the work on that one. She was the one doing the work. And from my point of view, it was like, wow, this is quite a miracle. And I was so thankful nothing went wrong. And he's beautiful and happy and healthy. He's just going into his second year of secondary school now. Wow. And it was pretty special. It was pretty special. It's a lovely story. Now, I'm going to ask you a question.
Special,
you can, if you play this to your wife later, you don't need to include this bit. All right. So I'm going to do a fake goodbye. Well, I've spoiled it now. So you go. All right. Thank you, Josh. Take care. All right. Mind how you go. Anyway, Josh, come back a minute.
Yep.
Do you feel that you got the credit you deserve?
Yes, I did. Okay. A lot of people were very complimentary about me staying
I should hope so. I should hope so. Because, I mean, the giving birth element of it, although tricky, it's kind of what we're designed for as human beings. You were not trained to do your bit, or indeed designed. No. You stepped up, mate.
Thank you, James.
You're very welcome. I am proud of you, Josh.
It was my name that was on it was Dad Delivers Baby on the newspaper, so I got the.
You got it in the paper
there as well. Yes.
Oh, sensational! This is a magnificent story. Oh, what lovely stuff, Josh. Love to you both. Love to you all. In fact, it is 22 minutes. You didn't. Hang on. Final question. You didn't consider a career change then afterwards?
Do you know what? Genuinely, I did, actually. I genuinely did.
Because it is such a magical thing. You thought, imagine doing this every day. But you didn't. Yeah. But you didn't.
And then it was when the moment dawned on me that actually sometimes this doesn't go very well. That I thought to myself, actually, no, I don't think it's cut out for it.
That's a really important point. And of course, while we have fun with these conversations, we have nothing but love and sympathy for anybody who would find this almost unbearable to listen to because of things that they went through. The other thing that Keith forgot was, have you ever been attacked by a wild animal? That was, so we've done, have you ever fainted? At the sight of something. It had to be. I don't think they've been our best phone-ins. Luckily, Josh has knocked this one out of the park already, so we can take this one to the bank. I don't think that have you ever fainted at the sight of something delivered what I hoped it would deliver. I wanted and then we did have you ever been attacked by a wild animal? That was pretty good because we got a lion, an actual lion. Have you ever landed a plane maybe next August? Take Eleanor, jot this down, will you? Next August, maybe. Have you ever landed a plane? Like just through air traffic control talking to I might take this week off next year actually, but anyway, have you ever landed a plane? That could go on the list, but we'd need a news story to sort of hook it on. 24 after 12 is the time. Neil's in Wigan. Neil, what happened?
Hello, I'm a heating engineer. I've been with a colleague attending a heating emergency.
Yeah.
And when we came out of the next door lady was screaming from upstairs, help, I'm having a baby, and all that lot. And I'm thinking, oh shit, here we go.
You can't say that on the radio. We just had to... No, listen, I just had to dump a little bit of what you said. No criticism. I'd have said exactly the same thing in the same circumstances, but don't use any more swear words, all right?
Okay.
That's all right. Carry on, Neil. So, I feel like a teacher now. You've made me feel like a headmaster, so just go on, Neil.
So anyway, I said, well, can you let me in? Can you let us in?
Yeah.
So she said, get me an ambulance. Anyway, she had two other children, one at 18 months old and one at 3-year-old. She sent the 3-year-old down to let us in, which was absolutely crazy.
Yeah.
We got in there. She was upstairs on the bed, no bottoms on. I've never seen my younger colleague turn white as much in my life. So she's in and I'm at it. Please don't. I won't push. I went, please, love, don't push. We were already on the phone to the ambulance, to 999. Yeah, I couldn't tell a word what they were saying because she was screaming so much. She were effing and blinding, ranting and raving. She were trying to get hold of her husband and a friend. Kids are running about all over. And I said, listen to my colleague, I said, can you take them children in there in the other room and all that lot? Anyway, she said, I won't push. I said, please don't push.
Why didn't you want her to push? You wanted to wait for the professionals to arrive?
For the professionals to arrive.
But they can't not push, Neil. That's the whole point, isn't it?
I know. But then the paramedic lady who was on the phone to me, so I've got got the phone in one ear.
Yeah.
I've got the kids running round me. I've got my colleague didn't know where to put his face. She's there screaming, ranting and raving. And I couldn't tell a bloody word what the lady was saying.
That's last warning, though. Don't get me into trouble, Neil. Carry on.
I'll try not to. So anyway, when I looked down, the baby's head was there. And they had a little captain's bed as well at side of her, because obviously the little ones must have come in every morning and all that lot. And she just pushed, and the baby come, and I managed to grab the blanket off the captain's bed and deliver the baby. And I'm just full of all sorts, all my pants and everything and all that lot, full of all sorts. But the cord was slightly round her ear, so I had to move the cord out the way of her ear so that she'd come further out and all that lot.
Yeah.
And so then the lady shouted, "Why is she not crying? Why is she not crying?" And she was blue and all that lot. And it's mad how natural it was to see the mucus in the baby's mouth and just turn her over and rubbed her back. And I'm thinking, please, God, please. Do you know what I mean? I was just getting ready to nip her bottom, and then she screamed.
Oh, my...
Absolutely crazy. And then the next thing is, the paramedics are there, and they're there, can we take over? And I went, it's all under control. And I've never seen as many ambulances or thingy, because apparently if she was going to the hospital, they'd have to be 2 ambulances, and then they also have to look after the children and all that. It was just absolutely mad.
You superstar. You absolute superstar.
And do you know, it was my first day of the new job as well.
Well, but did you ever go back and check? Did you ever...
Yeah, I did go back, and we had a few photos taken together and all that lot, but, I'm a bit private, and
yeah, no, fact. Yeah, you don't want to be an impositor. Of course you're a bit private. Yeah. I mean, you wouldn't have done it unless you'd been screaming out the window. There was no one else there. You look around, someone else is going to go. You realise it's got to be you. Next thing you know, you're...
All I'm saying is, I mean, obviously I'm pushing 60. What I'm saying is, it's more natural than you think to be able to help. I don't think there was anything, I did anything out of the ordinary, and I think that your average decent bloke would have done exactly the same thing.
I hope you're right. I think you are, and I hope you are, but of course none of us will know. It's easy for you to say, because you did do the right thing when the opportunity presented itself, but my goodness me, what a story. Neil, you're an absolute legend, mate. You really are. That is absolutely incredible. And we got away with it as well, I think. We had to dump the one word, and then the other one was okay. And we didn't go anywhere for the hat trick. That is absolutely incredible. I've got a WhatsApp from Donna. I mean, I'm just going to suggest cautiously that we may not have peaked yet on this phone-in, which I think we can all agree is already by far the best silly season phone-in of 2026. It's better than Have You Ever Been Attacked by a Wild Animal, even though we got a lion, and it's a lot better than Have You Ever Fainted at the Sight of Something, which was good, but nowhere near as good as it could have been. And I'm going to actually not take the blame for that one. I always do this. I always say, that phone-in didn't go as well as it should have done, and then I say, and that's probably my fault for not setting it up right or not. I think that was your fault. I think there were loads of great stories out there about you, but you were too hot to ring in, or you couldn't be bothered, or you just sort of... I'm going to blame you for that one that didn't work that well. Have you ever fainted at the sight of something? So we might come back and do that again at some point, possibly next summer after we've done Have You Ever Landed a Plane? Here's Tim Humphrey with your headlines.
James O'Brien on LBC.
2 minutes after 12, you are listening to James O'Brien on LBC, where we welcome back onto the programme now one of our favourite people, Lucy Easthope, an international advisor on disaster recovery and the author of Come What May, Life-Changing Lessons for Coping with Crisis, because as the situation in Nepal continues to understandably dominate the international news agenda, hundreds of people still missing, the death toll rising. Lucy's job is to rush towards these kind of scenarios or to oversee the emergency response, which is one of those phrases that we all use without having the first idea what it means. The latest, as you probably know, is that an overflowing lake in Tibet there are fears it may unleash a second flood in the area of Nepal that is already disaster hit. And the reason why I wanted to talk to Lucy, not least is because an awful lot of these areas can't even be reached. So how on earth do you respond to an emergency that you can't even reach, Lucy? And what will people in your line of work be doing right now?
Yeah, thank you so much for having me. And this is really a period of watchful waiting, which is incredibly frustrating. It's reminding me, actually, very, very different circumstances in one way, but very similar in another, of the days in the aftermath of the tsunami and earthquake in Japan, and then the Fukushima nuclear reactor. What we're seeing inside Britain's response at the moment is a real attempt to get information. It's very, very hard to put responders in, and that second lake is a real concern. I've got trusted colleagues on social media who are saying that at the moment, really, the only international help that's been accepted has been from South Korea, and we do not have a particularly large presence going out, but we do have a lot of work being done here and led by Ed Miliband.
What kind of work will that be?
At the moment, again, and it's very similar, very reminiscent for me for Japan. I'm only observing. I'm not responding at the moment, but it's very similar to that period of kind of gathering information on the hydrology and the geography. Right. These are these very massive ice rock avalanches, which we were told to predict as part of climate change. But as you'll be feeling as well, this summer it's like everything's come at once. It's incredibly hard to brief ministers on the theoretical. So what will be happening today is our ministers will be being briefed on the realities of this geology, which is one of the worst case scenarios. And I'm very conscious that there are families listening who will be waiting for news. The Foreign Office have a number that people can call. And at this stage, all that really does is take information from you. So these hours are starting to feel like weeks for those families who are worried.
So very powerfully put. And then when the situation has become clearer, and the business of looking after people whose entire lives have been washed away, what happens then?
So there's two strands, really. It's quite an interesting test, because obviously what Britain has done is it's folded its development work into its Foreign Office. And these are two different responses from Britain. So one is a development and support response, an aid response. And then the other is something I would describe as a bit more sharp-elbowed, which is actually to support our British citizens. And those are two responses, the same minister in charge, Ed Miliband, but two very different responses. Very sadly, this is pretty much one of the worst-case scenarios for getting information to families and also, sadly, getting their relatives back to them. This will be a very long, drawn-out process. And one thing that I think the Foreign Office are preparing for is to gather those families and be able to update as best they can. But we have very little reach into that area at the moment.
What is that? I don't want to be indelicate, but, I mean, these people are just waiting for their phone to ring, right, at the moment?
Yes, and often that call really doesn't come for a very long time. There isn't international coordination at the moment. This is one of the most politically fraught areas to try and respond internationally to. In the past, when we've responded for earthquakes, there's also, I write about this in When the Dust Settles, there's some hostility sometimes to the British Office of Help, and British intervention is seen as quite colonialist. So we are in a very delicate stage of negotiation. What I always say in these points is what is needed is donations of money, and there's a number of schemes. I haven't seen the DEC one yet, but I can see them for UNICEF to help the children in the region, very, very crucially.
And we've had this conversation before, and it often comes from the best of intentions, but money's the only thing worth giving.
Yes, please, no donations, second-hand items,
blankets or clothes or anything like that. No. Money.
Absolutely.
I understand the post-colonial context of what you've described. What are the other reasons why this is a politically fraught area?
So there's a very, very tense relationship, obviously, with China. Already we've seen disputes as to whose dams did what, where the rivers and the waters have come from. There will be a very delicate approach. I've been very interested actually watching the American media. I often compare and see what the American media and indeed their responders and response are doing, and it's been quite a nuanced and sensitive diplomatic response, not very heavy-handed, and we're obviously mirroring that. There's obviously obviously the challenge around Tibet as well. Aid in this area has traditionally been very political, and it's come with strings attached. So we're watching very closely on that aspect. We have, as the Prime Minister said yesterday, incredible search and rescue teams, but this is probably not the place we're going to be allowed to use them.
When would we expect workers to be making their way to the area? Or is that a silly question?
I'm not even sure
so we will. This time. No.
There's a couple of factors that are very up in the air. One is the risk assessment about the risk to those responders, and the other is the diplomatic. What we will see from British citizens, I am certain, is much more request from Britain to do more, because it will feel like they are in an absolute limbo.
Yeah, and finally, you may not want to answer this, which is fine, but quite a few of my listeners yesterday and now today, as I talk to you, a little bit confused by the figure of £5 million that Andy Burnham announced yesterday, and suggesting that sounds quite paltry, but that would be par for the course in the current situation.
Yes, it's a very initial amount,
yes.
Probably to structure initial what we call Maslow's basic needs: food, water, shelter, and then looking more broadly and holistically at the plan. There will be an additional budget being negotiated in the Foreign Office right now to support the British citizens, because what people need to understand, and it's the same police officers that are responding to everything else from riots to road traffic collisions, is if we are asked to, and if we can, we will deploy British police officers to support the identification effort, and that is a millions of pound response. So that is a different budget to this, and that's where I would expect Ed Miliband to be briefing Andy Burnham today.
Thank you, Lucy. You're brilliant at explaining this stuff, but obviously that's a small part of what you do. You can read more about what Lucy does and what people like her do in the book that I mentioned, Come What May, but also in the book that she mentioned, When the Dust Settles, Searching for Hope After Disaster, because we use these phrases all the time, like emergency response, or we hear that figure of £5 million without knowing much about it. I also interviewed Lucy on Full Disclosure a couple of years ago, and that's worth a listen as well. Not to distract any attention or concern away from the actual tragedy unfolding in Nepal and Tibet as we speak. That death toll now estimated to be 547, but it will be considerably higher than that by the time any semblance of normality is restored to that corner of the planet. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. I'm going to read you this from Donna, just to set the tone, to turn the gears back to where we were before. Dear James, writes Donna, a few years ago, I was at the hospital as my son had broken his foot playing sport and was there for a checkup. After the scan, I left him by the entrance to go and get the car and bring it around as he was struggling to walk. This is the fear, isn't it, that you end up, like Alan up in Bolton, you just end up, and that accent was pure Fred Dibner, wasn't it? That's the Fred Dibner accent, I think? That was just perfect. It almost got contagious then. So in the hospital car park. In the hospital car park, a woman shouted, "The baby is coming, help me!" You just looked the other way, right? This poor woman who'd been turned away from one hospital because there wasn't enough room, had been told to travel to this hospital. She was hunched over a car crying with her bloody hands, and that's bloody as in blood on them, not bloody as in Alan said, on a couple of cars that she'd crawled past. Dad had dashed up to A&E to get her a wheelchair. The poor woman, not being very good with blood or medical things. I looked around in the hope that someone more competent than me would be rushing to her rescue, but no one did, so I rushed over there, and as I got there, all I could do, I just muttered, "It will be okay." As soon as I got there, she pulled down her joggers and told me to get down there, and the baby's head was there, and this poor woman's baby literally just slipped into my arms. Whew. Unbelievably, in capital letters, and I think on this occasion we'll allow them, the baby was fine. The poor dad missed everything, but came flying down with some paramedics, while another woman came over and covered her up for modesty's sake and helped her to stay upright because my hands were full. The poor mum was shaking and crying so much she wasn't even able to hold her baby. I let Dad and the paramedics take over and visited them later in the hospital that night, and baby was no worse off for its bumpy start to life. Whew. Andy's been in touch. He wants to know whether Neil actually did manage to fix the boiler next door. Was it Neil or Alan? It was Neil. It was Neil. Why am I calling him Alan? Why am I calling him Alan, Keith? No idea. 12:43 is the time. Sav's in Bognor Regis. Sav, what made you pick up the phone?
Oh, hi, James. Well, I had an experience with my second son, and luckily I'd read a book about what to do in an emergency, giving birth. And I'd been in labour all day. My mum and dad came round, and we had a Chinese takeaway, and I kept...
What did you have? Can you remember?
Oh, I can't remember. It's 49 years ago.
Spare ribs, probably. Sweet and sour prawn.
Oh, yeah.
Carry on.
And I just kept walking backwards and forwards in the kitchen, trying to sort of control the, pains. Anyway, then I was sick, and so my mum was in a wheelchair, by the way, and they said, all right, we'll go. The maternity unit was at the end of the road.
Okay.
Anyway, once they'd gone, I sort of laid down.
Hang on, where did they go?
Oh, they went home.
Oh, I thought they were saying we've got to go. They were going to take you to the maternity unit. You're giving birth and they went home.
No, well, yeah, they let me get on with it.
Who paid for the Chinese?
My dad.
Okay, fair enough. Carry on.
So because I started to relax, I think I suddenly realised I wanted to push. So I'm lying on the bed and I thought, right, okay, I've got to lift the head up as and when it comes out. My husband ran off and phoned them and said, you better come back.
Phoned your parents?
My parents.
Not the hospital, not the ambulance?
No, I know. So I'm giving birth and my mum came in and I said, right, you need to lift him up, and I'm still pushing. And
Did it not occur, sorry to interrupt, did it not occur to anybody to phone the relevant authorities?
I don't think so.
No, I'm not criticising, I'm just curious. Do you know what? I'm reminded of the time my wife rang me 10 minutes before the show started to tell me that the dishwasher was leaking, and I was like, "What do you expect me to do? Does your father have any medical training?"
My dad was a medic in the army.
Oh, now it all makes sense then. So there he is.
But he sent my mum in
the wheelchair. So your mum wheels herself into that, right?
Yeah, and anyway, gave birth completely, and she fell out of her wheelchair.
What, with shock or because she was trying to get herself into a difficult angle?
Yeah, she was leaning forward, yeah.
And he's 49 now.
Yeah, and the annoying thing was they did send a midwife round because somebody made a phone call, and then I still had to go to hospital even though I was fine. And
it needs
to
be better safe than sorry, Sav. Though.
I know. I know.
There it is. So you did it effectively. Who cut the umbilical cord, if you don't mind me asking?
I think when the midwife came, because
she arrived, and then you had to go to the hospital anyway.
Yeah, but I was quite a stickler about you don't cut the cord too soon.
Oh, well done.
So
and you did it.
pleased.
You did it all effectively. You did it all yourself, really.
Yes, it was brilliant.
Yeah. Okay. Well, there. I mean, all human life is here. What a lovely story. 12:46 is the time. Thank you, Sav.
James O'Brien on LBC.
I need to clear something up. All right. I got myself into a bit of bother earlier when I was talking about construction work, and this despite having been a builder, of course. But I don't have a French drain. I do have a soakaway. So a French drain is what Victoria described, and I read out to you. That's a sort of vertical pipe full of gravel. A soakaway serves the same purpose, but that's what I've got. Crates full of shingles, like crates full of stuff, in a big old crate under the lawn that works as a kind of overflow. So just to be clear, that I don't have a French drain, I have a soakaway. But the main point of that story was to invite your tales of cowboy builders. But I don't like to leave errors behind me. I like to, make sure we've got everything right. 12:50 is the time. Have you ever delivered a baby? Or indeed, have you ever given birth alone? We've now covered both of those. Some extraordinary text still coming in as well, but I want more. 0345 6060973 is the number that you need. I'm only going to read you the first half of this one, and then you may never forget it, because you so want to know more about this story. It's from Joe. Are you ready for this? I gave birth to a baby in the front seat of my Jeep in 2006 in Colorado. as my husband would not get out of bed and did not believe I was in labour. That's it. I'm not going to read any more of that story. I'm just going to leave that, because it goes on to explain a little bit of context about something terrible that had happened in the area recently. So the media really wanted a good news story, and she ended up on all the news channels where she lived. And you just have so many questions, don't you, about mostly your husband, and I suppose whether you're still with him. How can you stay in bed? I learnt to drive so that Mrs. O'Brien would be able to get to hospital safely when she was in labour. He stayed in bed and didn't believe she was in labour. Did the marriage survive, Joe? What time is it? 12:51. We've got a little bit of time for you to get back in touch and tell us. I mean, I kind of hope so. I wouldn't wish divorce on anybody, but he certainly. I hope he got you a nice bunch of flowers. Apparently, French drains are laid horizontally. Listen, let's just pretend that never happened. I know. Let's just excise that from the thing. Who's doing the podcast today? Can we just remove all mention of runoffs and soakaways and French drains? Just a flipping minefield. Absolute minefield. I shouldn't have mentioned anything, honestly. And me a builder as well. 12:52 is the time. Pete's in Sheffield. Pete, what have you got?
James, hi, good afternoon. Hello. I'm really glad your researchers let me squeeze this one in.
Go on.
Many years ago, I was a young copper down south, and we saw a guy pull into a petrol station, and we knew he didn't have a driving licence, and we knew he was wanted for burglary and other offences.
Oh, boy.
So we pull in, I hop out the car, and I say to him, got a driving licence yet, mate? Being funny. And he said, no, but I've got a girlfriend in the back seat giving birth.
That's an interesting moral dilemma, isn't it? Because, I mean, you need to keep your numbers up.
Yeah, well, what we decided to do was stick him in the back of their car, and I would drive that, and my mate would blue light us to the hospital.
Wow.
Which we did. And on the journey, he says to me, the baby's coming, what do I do?
He's in the back with her now.
He's in the back with her now, with his car. My mate's blue lighting us in the front of us to hospital.
Yeah.
And I say to him, I'm trying to give him instructions whilst driving safely.
As a copper, do you get trained in this then?
Well, you get some aspects of,
Okay.
what you do. And I've done it before anyway.
Oh.
And then in the back seat, you've got, and out pops the baby. So I've now got newborn baby, girlfriend and fella in the back seat of the car. Anyway, we get to the hospital, James, and everything's fine. They go in, everybody's all right.
Yeah.
We're not going to drag the guy away from his new baby.
Snowflakes.
So we come to an agreement with him that he will come into the police station the next morning when we come on duty, hand himself in, we'll deal with him and bail him or whatever it takes. And at 3:00 the following afternoon, we had to go around his house and arrest him because he decided it would be much better to wet the baby's head.
He'd gone out on the lash, had he?
Yeah, he'd gone out on the lash rather than come in and complete his part of the bargain. So it was a hard lesson for us, to be honest.
Well, I think in retrospect you did the right thing. So you could have picked him up whenever you wanted, really. You knew where he was. But you needed to find him behind the wheel of the car without a licence, really.
Well, we didn't need to find him behind the wheel of the car. We were looking for him. And
but did you nick him for that, though? Did you nick him for the driving?
Yeah, we nicked him for that and the burglary. Yeah. And the other offence.
I mean, you had to, didn't you? But if I'd have had some sympathy for it. A good lawyer could have got him off on the driving charge, I reckon. Don't you think?
Probably.
I mean, what would you do? I mean, I'd be the lawyer. I'd say, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what in all good conscience would you have done in those circumstances? His beloved, his inamorata, the mother of his unborn child is writhing around on the kitchen floor in agony. He has the keys to a car in his possession, ladies and gentlemen of the jury. Who here would caution him against taking her to the medical facilities at the first available... I'd have got him off in a heartbeat, mate.
Yeah, I agree. You know, who would drive a car without a licence or insurance? Or MOT or anything
yeah,
else?
all right. He's spoiling it now. I forgot about all the insurance and the rest of it. So there it is. Did they name the baby after you?
I don't think
Did they heck? Did they heck us like?
Not unless they called it something beginning with B.
Oh, dear. Oh, boy. Well, I've got an interesting entry into the world. I hope the life went better than its beginnings. It is 12:55. You are listening to James O'Brien on LBC. Maria is in Thurrock. Maria, what would you like to say?
Hello.
Hello.
So, me and my friend have been best friends for 35 years.
Oh, yeah.
She's a single mum of 2, now 3. We'd gone out for the day. We knew that it was due date, so we'd done what every midwife tells you to do, go out, go and walk curbs and whatnot.
Yeah.
So throughout the day, we picked our children up, and she'd said, Maria, I'm going to let you know when to come round because I'm going to take myself to hospital as she is a single parent.
Okie doke.
I got the message, Maria, you need to come round, contractions are happening. So by that time...
So you were going to look after the other 2?
I was going to look after the other 2. So when I'd got to her home, I'd called the ambulance, and around this time, it was when the ambulances were so busy, it was taking 40 to an hour to get to people. So she's now arched over, she's in pain, she's about to deliver the baby, so... The ambulance crew was saying to me, right, you need to get her on the bed. So obviously, I've never delivered a baby. I've never given birth myself. So I'd managed to get her on the bed.
And that was it? Nice and straightforward?
No, not really. Because 10-15 minutes into it, baby had come out. She wasn't breathing. They were telling me that I needed to grab a shoelace. Tie it around the umbilical cord, which I'd done, having to give mouth-to-mouth to a brand new baby.
Yeah.
Ambulance crew got there half hour after, which by that time, they were both absolutely fine.
You did it. You pulled it off, Maria.
I did.
Was it a boy or a girl?
It was a little girl, and she is named after me.
Oh, yeah, that's what I wanted. That's what I blooming wanted. Yes, it got named after you. Finally, we've hit the flipping jackpot, lads. The baby named after the person who delivered the baby, who was not a midwife, a doctor, or a medical professional in any way, shape, or form. Maria, I love you.
Thank you.
Oh, thank you. That's incredible. Oh, that was by far the best silly season phone-in, wasn't it? Much better than Have You Ever Fainted? I don't know who came up with that idea. Robert Harris, the author of all sorts of things. Conclave, I suppose, most recently and most famously, but also Fatherland, which is an absolute classic, the Cicero trilogy. Also, one of those very rare journalists that really did become a best-selling novelist and be able to turn his back upon journalism. Worked on Panorama with Jeremy Paxman. Fascinating bloke, fascinating interview. Here is a little taste of it. Did you enjoy proximity to power? Because you hadn't really had it before, had you?
No, it was fascinating, and I although I later had some falling out with Tony Blair, I will always be grateful for him letting me in and letting me see that, because I saw a man on the brink of becoming Prime Minister with a landslide and got to just sit with him. I was actually standing on the living room rug watching the television in his constituency home when David Dimbleby announced the results of the exit poll and said it will be Labour with a majority of 140.
What did he do?
I said, how do you feel? And he said, I don't feel anything. And then the phone went, and it was Bill Clinton calling to congratulate. It was an epic night. Because before that, I'd been to his constituency house, and it was quite just a normal house. When I went back that night to be with him when he got the result, which had been agreed I would be allowed that access, it was ringed by men with machine guns. It was a totally different atmosphere, because, of course, everyone knew that this was the transfer of power. And so to see that, to be a novelist, very few journalists get that access.
Yeah.
But to be a novelist and get that access.
That's what I was thinking.
Well, that was gold dust.
This is the short version of my end of show address. And here's Sheila Fogarty.
James O'Brien on LBC.